Simon & Schuster Audio presents Star Trek Deep Space Nine, The 34th Rule by Armin Shimerman and David George. Read by Armin Shimerman.
The universe was about to make sense. Quark stood behind the bar and anxiously studied the display screen above the replicator. Every few seconds, one complicated set of matrices replaced another, causing the display to emit a soft electronic hum, and Quark's mind hummed along with it. It's going to happen. Monetary values would slide the way he had foreseen. He would arrange the final transactions in this elaborate financial dance, and it would be done. Soon, he would be one step closer, one significant step closer to being able to purchase the moon he had long dreamed of owning. Quark's mind devoured the ever-changing numbers until the heavy shuffling of feet directly behind him prompted him to blank the data. It was only more. The lumbering figure dropped onto a seat on the other side of the bar and set down a tall cobalt blue glass. Quark nodded toward the glass. You need a refill? He reached for the glass, but Morn pulled it away and pointed a finger inside. Quark peered over the rim and saw a small amount of bright yellow liquid. Oh, you don't want that. There's no flavor left in that. You're really going through this stuff. I'm going to have to order another case of Tranya from my supplier. While Morn picked up his glass, Quark took the time to scan the rest of the bar. Lieutenant Commander Dax was down from ops to provide her amusing, sometimes biting, commentary of the weekly dart match between Chief O'Brien and Dr. Bashir. And somewhere, Quark was fairly sure, Odo lurked. Earlier, Quark had heard the shapeshifter come in and heard the strange liquid rushing sound Odo made whenever he moved quickly, no matter his form. The sound, though nearly sub-audible, was unmistakable to Ferengi ears. He looked back over at Morn. You know what I should do is just close the entire place down. If the deal I'm working on right now proceeds the way I designed it to, I should have enough assets to make a successful transition to a new business. What do I need this place for anymore? It's always been more trouble than profit. I'm not just a bartender, you know. I'm not even just a bar owner. I'm a businessman. There's a difference. Morn continued to regard him without saying anything. Fine. Just keep staring at me like that. Quark stepped over to the screen and touched a finger to the control section. The alarm ceased. Morn, enjoy your Tranya. I've got work to do. Quark returned to the display and brought the arrays of data back up on the screen. He scanned the readouts, symbols representing dozens of different currencies. Ferengi, Bajoran, Bolian, Uridian, and others decorated the screen. A slight tingling began in his earlobes. He reread the file while his hand hovered above the transmit button. Quark hesitated. Once he approved the transactions, there would be no turning back. This is your best chance. The best deal you've ever put together. It will work. He repeated the 60-second rule of acquisition in his head. The riskier the road, the greater the profit. He jabbed the button and waited. Failure now would destroy him. My moon. Cousin Gale owns his own moon. He recalled the luxurious estate from which Gale ruled his natural satellite, where a sophisticated communications console permitted monitoring of 3 different financial exchanges. For years, Quark had privately aspired to Gale's standard of achievement. Over time, Quark's brother Rom had come to share in his vision, frequently entreating Quark to describe the moon and his home he intended to have constructed on its surface. Rom would even offer his own details of life there, talking about his room and about what he would do there, mentioning such activities as raising small animals, like cottontail gibré and trenny cats and the like, and planting a garden. The tranquil picture Rom painted of life on the moon bespoke his view that Quark would retire there. But Quark had no intention of dwelling in retirement. Business was not only his livelihood, it was his recreation as well. Had Zek attained the office of Grand Nagus for the sake of the office itself? No, of course not. Money begets money, and power begets money. And the Nagus, while serving in his official role, also used the influence and resources of his position to continue engaging with great success in his own business ventures. On his moon, Quark would do the same. 2 words began to flash on the display. Incoming transmission. Quark felt exhilarated and terrified at the same time. Contracts had been written and agreed to. Monies had been spent and received. Inventories had been purchased and sold, all as a result of his foresight and maneuvering. Like the proverbial wise man, Quark could hear profit in the wind, and it sounded sweet. Barely able to curb his excitement, he manipulated the display controls to gain access to his primary account on Bajor. His gaze traveled to the bottom line of the report. A long string of digits representing his net worth was displayed there in red. Quark gasped. Right now, he was deeper in debt than any individual in the quadrant. The 97 minutes following Quark's financial ruin were among the most difficult to live through in his life. It will work out. Everything is happening just the way you planned it. His debts not only surpassed his assets, they dwarfed them. The great sums Quark owed had gone to fund a single purchase. The commodity was one not typically available to individuals, but Quark had been in the right place at the right time. Quark saw the words incoming transmission flashing on the display. His earlobes grew cold from fear, heat slipping from them like water spilling down a drain. He punched the receive button, and the message printed on the screen. Quark read it twice, then a third time just to be sure he did not misread any details. He checked the chronometer. He had another 23 minutes yet to make good on his debt. He smiled. It had not even been dramatic. Quark worked quickly at the display and gained access to his account on Bajor. His net worth came up in black. The deal had been very profitable. He had done it. Now, finally, Quark had seed money. From here, he could really start to deal, really begin to build up his finances to the point where he could afford the moon and its accoutrements. He turned to face the rest of the bar. Everybody, drinks are on sale. Drinks are half price for the next quarter hour. He had been about to say drinks are on the house, but he was interrupted by the financial planner in his head, who wanted to know why, just because he had successfully concluded a deal, he was about to behave so foolishly. I really should give up this place. Leaving this place and these people would be nice, and Quark eventually would. But not yet. Being here at the mouth of the wormhole had permitted him to make this first sizable deal. Turning once more to the display, Quark re-examined the number, spelling out his net worth. This makes sense. This is how the universe is supposed to work. In a corner of the octagonal room, Grand Nagus Zek stood, leaning on his cane. The Nagus regarded an old wooden box. A pair of hinged doors, closed at the moment, were set into one side. Sealed up as it was, the box hardly seemed impressive. But Zek smiled as he contemplated how much profit he estimated its contents would bring him. The Nagus gazed around, verifying that arrangements were complete. The anteroom had been configured for the imminent arrival of a delegation from Bajor, led by their Minister of Religious Artifacts. The Bajorans were vigorously seeking to obtain the object that now sat in his room. In the box, sitting on the pedestal table, an orb of the prophets. The orb was one of only 9 such objects known to exist. At one time, every known orb had been kept on Bajor, but when the decades-long Cardassian occupation of Bajor had ended several years ago, all but one of the objects had been seized by the departing conquerors. Zek had come into possession of this orb, the 9th orb, the so-called Orb of Wisdom, through a contact on Cardassia 3. The orbs were curious artifacts. Hourglass-shaped and a vibrant green in color, they glowed from within and had been known to defy gravity. Other, more spiritual powers had long been rumored. The orb was the type of commodity that the Nagus loved to peddle, because many factions were compelled by different reasons to possess it. As Zek had anticipated, no group desired to possess it more than the Bajorans. They asked, cajoled, demanded. Zek put them off, maintaining that there was other business he needed to conduct before he could even concern himself with the sale of the orb. Eventually, the Nagus had received an impassioned letter signed by both the Bajorans' highest governmental officer and their religious leader. In the letter, the First Minister and the Kai argued that because the orb had originally been found in their star system, it truly belonged to the Bajoran people. They pledged to pay a reasonable price for it. The subtext suggested that they might even be willing to pay an unreasonable price. They had to have the orb. Zek had expected the letter, and he used it as the impetus to begin the process, an auction that would lead to the eventual sale of the orb. And the Bajorans had entered the bidding. Zek looked over at the box in which the orb sat and wondered what the Bajorans would bid for it today. There seemed little question that the amount would be sizable. Whatever amount the Bajorans bid, he knew it would not be enough. Major Kira Nerys strode into Quark's near closing time. Because of the lateness of the hour, Quark had already sent all of his employees home, but for one of the Dabo girls, Lita and Broik. And if he could have fully trusted Broik to close up, Quark would have headed for his own quarters. As Quark cleaned a table next to the railing on the second level, he noticed Kira standing at the bar talking to Broik, who pointed up towards him. Kira followed the gesture and she spotted Quark. She made eye contact with him and smiled. Quark shivered. He was only slightly less wary of people who smiled than he was of people who made promises. Quark then headed down to the first level. "Hello, Quark. How are you?" Quark blinked. "How am I? Major, what do you want from me?" "What makes you think I want something from you?" "Call it Ferengi intuition. We always know when our pockets are about to be picked." "I heard you completed an amazing deal not too long ago." "Yes, I made a wondrous deal a while ago." "Last call." Morn produced a sour look when he heard this, but Quark paid him no attention. As he moved behind the bar, Kira stood across from him. "Something to drink for you, Major?" "No, actually. I was wondering if you would do something for me." "That would depend on what the something is you want me to do. So, what is it?" "How well do you know Grand Nagus Zek?" "The Nagus? Well, I'd have to say we have a rapport. He likes me." "Are you certain?" "Why, Major? Why do you need to know?" "I thought you would have guessed the orb." "The orb of the prophets? The one the Nagus is auctioning off?" Kira's eyes grew suddenly cold. "Yes, the 9th orb, the one he won't sell to Bajor." Finally, Quark understood. Kira was deeply committed to her religious beliefs. If she believed that the Nagus would not sell the orb he possessed to her people, she would be roused to action. But Quark knew of no reason why the Nagus would not sell to the Bajorans for the right price. "Of course he'll sell the orb to your people. Surely the people of Bajor are willing to pay for something they so desperately want." "We are willing to pay, but that doesn't seem to matter." "Paying always matters. I'm sure that if the Bajorans just commit enough of their resources... Quark, the Nagus expelled Bajor from the bidding for the orb earlier today. 7 factions bid. 4 were supposed to be eliminated, leaving 3 to bid in the final round. Quark nodded. And Bajor didn't make the cut? Kira clenched her teeth. There was no justification not to sell the orb to Bajor. Well, there was obviously one reason. One good reason. Why didn't the Bajorans bid enough? We bid all that we could. Our treasury would have been gutted to pay for the return of the orb. Well, Major, this is all very interesting, but I'm not exactly sure why you're telling me. Clearly, there's nothing I can do about it. Are you sure about that? Major, if the Nagus has made a decision... Kira interrupted. Then you can speak to him. He likes you. You can't possibly believe I could change the Nagus's mind. Why not? You can be very persuasive. All I want you to do is to urge him to reinstate us in the bidding. Quark paced slowly back and forth beside Kira. You have to give me time to think about this. You don't need to think about this. Quark stopped and met Kira's eyes. Major, we, the Ferengi, we have rules about these sorts of situations. And the second rule of acquisition is, the best deal is the one that brings the most profit. Quark, the orbs of the prophets are religious artifacts, religious symbols. They are extremely important to us as a people. We are willing to pay well. I understand your perspective, Major. Try to understand mine. Would you ever attempt to get Kai Wynn to change her beliefs? What I'm asking of you has nothing to do with religious beliefs. You're wrong. What you're talking about concerns the tenets of business, and business is the most important thing to a Ferengi. The acquisition of profit is as meaningful to us as the spiritual life is to the Bajorans. Are you saying that the Nagus is right in refusing to sell the orb to Bajor? Major, Grand Nagus Zek is not merely a businessman. He is also a symbol. Virtually a religious symbol of financial acumen for the Ferengi. For me to attempt to change his mind, well, I would be inviting censure and a fine. And I would be wrong to do it. Kira simmered and stared down at Quark. Profit is more important to the Ferengi, to you, Quark, than the spiritual needs of an entire population? Major Kira, you want me to help Bajor, but you're not even considering my beliefs. Perhaps if you could do that. I don't want to do that. I would never want to do that. Kira turned and slammed into Broik, and the tray Broik was carrying flew through the air. Kira made her way to one of the central turbolifts and ordered it to take her to the promenade. She did not know whether her world's official response to the Nagus' actions would result in the Ninth Orb being brought to its proper home on Bajor, but she was proud of the stand her people had chosen to take. The promenade was coming to life when she arrived there. The doors to Quark's bar were closed. There was no answer. As she considered where to look for Quark, she heard his voice. Never mind how I came by it. You want one? Then I happen to have one. The words were coming from the replimat. Kira walked over to the self-service eatery and peered inside. Her gaze moved from table to table until she spotted Quark. He was near the back wall, having breakfast with a Bolian. No doubt, a traitor. Kira slipped into the replimat and wove through the morning diners. Quark, I want to talk to you. Major, I'm in a business meeting at the moment. The Bolian pushed his chair back from the table and stood up. I think we're done anyway. Quark turned to Kira. Thank you, Major. You may just have cost me a sale. Quark began to reach into the snack bowl sitting before him. Listen to me, Quark. Bajor officially responded this morning to being removed from the bidding for the orb. They decided to demand that the Nagus reinstate Bajor in the final round of the auction within exactly 3 days. But if the Nagus doesn't, then all Ferengi will be evicted from Bajoran space. Evicted? I can't be evicted. I have a business here. Right now you do. But 3 days from now, that will all depend on Grand Naga Zek. Wonderful. Who am I supposed to trust to run the bar until this pain in the lobes goes away? And what about my access to the Gamma Quadrant? It will be extremely inconvenient if I can't live on the station. It won't matter where you live, Quark. No Ferengi will be permitted anywhere within the Bajorn system at any time. But my business, so much of it depends on the Gamma Quadrant. Then I guess you'll just have to get there the hard way. Let's see. If you take a ship at Warp 5, it should take you, about 3,000 years. Major, thank you for your compassion. Kira stood from the table. And you won't have to find someone to manage the bar while you're gone. If the deadline passes, your business will be nationalized. That's robbery. Kira met Quark's glare with her own. A slight movement caught her attention. It was in the bowl sitting on the table in front of Quark. A serving of live grubs. One had been bitten in half and was oozing a greenish ichor. Her stomach tightened at the sight. You know, Major, this isn't fair. I didn't do anything. No, you didn't, Quark. But you should have. Quark's fingers dashed across the controls of the comm panel in his quarters, like the legs of a trained and hyperactive spider. His brother Rom's nose was nearly pressed against the display. Do you mind, Rom? As empty as your head is most of the time, it's not transparent.
Oh, sorry.
He moved behind Quark's seat.
What's the matter, brother? Can't you find him?
No, I don't think he's on Ferenginar.
But where else would he be?
He could be anywhere, you idiot.
Well, maybe we should leave him a message like you did for the others.
I would leave him a message if I knew where to leave one. Rom started to wander aimlessly about the room. He stared at the blank display for a short time, then came over and joined Quark on the sofa.
Brother, I don't want to have to leave Deep Space Nine.
Don't worry, Rom.
But I like it here. I have friends here. And I'm on Chief O'Brien's engineering team. This place is my home.
Stop whining. I told you not to worry about this. We're not going to have to leave.
But why are we trying to contact anybody on Ferenginar at all?
I just want to make sure that Grand Naga Zek is going to allow the Bajorns back in the auction for the orb. That's all. Once I've confirmed that, won't you feel better?
Yes. I already feel much better.
Quark regarded his brother and saw what appeared to be an expression of genuine relief on his face. Abruptly, he was reminded of another time back in their youth on Ferenginar. It had started for Quark when Rom ducked through the short, circular doorway into the front room of their family's home and rushed through the house to the bedroom he and Quark shared. The usually loquacious Rom never came home without wanting to share the events of his day with the entire family. Father immediately followed Rom to his and Quark's room. Quark and Mother trailed along behind. They found Rom manic and distraught. He bounded about the room like a ball in a dabba wheel. It took some time before Rom admitted that he had been transacting business with other boys outside of school over the course of the past several seasons. Then Rom confessed that he had not succeeded. Some of the boys with whom he had done business were older and more adept than he was, and one of them, Brink, or Briel, had maneuvered Rom into a desperate position. A debt had arisen from the many deals Rom had made. Brink, or Briel, had obtained this marker on the sly and presented it during a brief period of time in which Rom found himself completely without resources. Rom had been left with no alternative but to offer remuneration in whatever manner this unexpected creditor would allow. Brink, or Briel, insisted that, as payment, he be given ownership of Rom's right hand. For the older boy, the lawful change of ownership of a part of another person's anatomy was trophy enough, proof that he had mastered the art of business manipulation. Quark observed all this in silence from the doorway until he could watch the pathetic tableau no longer. He fled to the main room of the house in order to escape his family. He regretted what had happened to his brother, but at the same time, he recognized that business deals created profit and loss. And Rom had lost. Later, under the pretense of tutoring Rom in business, Quark extracted from his brother precise accounting of all the business he had conducted during the past year. Eventually, Quark constructed and implemented some deals of his own. It took nearly a year, but ultimately, Breek or Briel suffered much the same fate as he had brought to Rom. In short order, ownership of Rom's right hand passed to Quark, and then to Rom. The expression of relief that appeared on Rom's face then resembled Rom's expression of relief now, at realizing that they would not have to leave Deep Space Nine.
Brother, what would have happened if we had been forced to leave the station?
It doesn't matter. It's pointless to even think about it.
I guess we would have gone to stay with Moogie, huh?
Absolutely not. Quark despised their childhood nickname for their mother, but his brother had never outgrown using it. It's not going to happen. Listen, ever since Cisco blackmailed me into staying here and keeping the bar open, everybody else has been trying to push me off the station. Odo would love to throw me in the brig for all eternity. Worf would be happy to have me as an appetizer with dinner some night. And Kira...
Brother, she doesn't like you.
Thank you. I know that. She so gleefully told me that we might have to leave. You know, I think she just hates all Ferengi.
She wasn't mean to me when she told me.
She talked to you too?
Yeah. I think she told all the Ferengi on the station about the situation. She is the Bajor liaison.
Incoming transmission.
The display came to life, revealing the image of a formally dressed Ferengi. The man's jacket was accoutred with the emblem of the Nagus' palace.
Quark, you one-lobed wonder.
Listen who's talking, Zrel. At least I don't have to wait for the Nagus' hand-me-down business tips to earn a living.
That's right, Quark. You can make bad deals on your own, without any help at all. I'd like the strips of gold-pressed latinum you promised on your message, if I returned your transmission.
I said I'd give you 5 strips of latinum if you answered a question of mine.
Information should cost more than 5 strips.
Perhaps it should. By the way, how is that crazy woman of yours? Perilka, isn't it?
Yes, Perilka. She's fine. Why do you ask?
Oh, I was just curious if that holo recording of her, attired in that freighter officer's uniform, was ever made public. Ferengi women were not granted the privilege of wearing clothes by their society. For it to become known that Zrel's woman had violated such a taboo would have invited embarrassment and probably the loss of his position.
How do you know about that?
Quark had heard this rumor about Perilka the last time he had been on Ferenginar, but he was not actually in possession of any holo recording.
Will I still get the latinum, Quark?
Just a minute. Quark initiated a transfer of 20 strips of gold-pressed latinum, a full bar, from one of his accounts on Bajor directly into Zrel's holding on Ferenginar. There. Do you see the transfer?
Yes, it's confirmed. Now, what is it you want?
Just one piece of information. Is the Nagus going to reinstate the Bajorans in the auction for the orb?
That's it? Oh, that's easy. There's nothing the Bajorans can do that will compel him to reverse his earlier decision.
Quark felt his lobes go cold. But not allowing the Bajorans, that doesn't make any sense. The second rule of acquisition.
Quark, what about that holo recording?
Don't worry, I don't have it.
Somehow I didn't think you did. As always, Quark, it's been a pleasure doing business with you.
Zrel broke the subspace connection, and Rom stepped over to the comm panel.
Oh, what are we going to do, brother?
We're going to do the one thing we can do, Rom. We're going to beg. The building that housed the office of First Minister sat not in the center of Bajor's capital city, but on its outskirts. On the balcony, just outside the office, Shakar stood, basking in the enchanting blanket of warmth provided by the springtime sun. After fighting for more than a quarter of a century to free his world and its people from the Cardassian occupation, Shakar found that there were few things that pleased him more than simply gazing out at the majestic Bajoran wilderness. For all of Shakar's adult life, and even before that in his youth, what he had been able to do for his people had been to battle ceaselessly against tyrannical invaders. There had been successes against the Cardassians. Shakar was especially proud of his role in liberating the forced labor camp at Galatep, at which unspeakable atrocities had routinely been committed. But those successes had only been able to be measured by individuals. The Cardassians had only left Bajor when they had wanted to leave, and that had only been once they had torn all of the readily harvested resources from it. Minister, Shakar jumped. Just beyond the threshold stood Kai Wynn, the spiritual leader of the Bajoran people. I'm sorry, Eminence. I didn't hear you come back in. At his prompting, he and the Kai had taken a few moments' pause during the morning meeting. He had felt the need for a respite before moving on to discuss the issues of the Ninth Orb and the Ferengi. The Kai had indulged him, but now it was clear that she wanted to continue their meeting. He started back into his office. Inside, the Kai crossed to an overstuffed sofa and sat down. She reviewed the situation. We have made it clear to the Ferengi that all of Bajor is united in our quest for the return of the Ninth Orb. Yes, Eminence, but there's been no official response yet from the Ferengi Nagus. We must be prepared, then, to act on the admonition we delivered to the Ferengi. You do not doubt that this is for the greater good, child. No, but it seems unfair to act against all Ferengi when it is only the deeds of one, the Nagus, which impede us. It may or may not be unfair, but it is politically necessary. It is critical that we do not display weakness in this matter, for Bajor is already widely perceived in that vein. Shakar sighed. I understand your arguments. You must know that I believe that, when it is warranted, a battle must be waged. They listened as Shakar's assistant's voice came over the intercom. Minister, there are two gentlemen here to see you. They claim that it's urgent. Quark's voice interjected. I'm not just claiming that it's urgent. It is urgent. We want to speak with you about your intention of closing your system to all Ferengi. I'm sorry, Minister. These two Ferengi gentlemen reside on Deep Space Nine, and they say they would like to discuss amnesty for themselves should the Nagus not allow Bajor to bid for the orb. Shakar glanced over at the Kai as he considered what to do. The Kai spoke. Minister, Grand Nagus Zek refused any conversation with Bajor after removing us from the auction for the Ninth Orb. Our official imperative to Grand Nagus Zek and the Ferengi Alliance specifically stated that, in view of their unwillingness to speak with Bajor, there would be no room for negotiation with respect to our request to be re-entered in the auction. But, Eminence, mustn't there always be room for negotiation? No, not always. What we want is simple and understandable. Shakar weighed the arguments Kai Wynn had presented. Please tell the two gentlemen that I will be unable to meet with them until after the situation between Bajor and Ferenginar has been settled. Shakar then walked over to the sofa and sat down near the Kai. Do you think this will work? Truly, I do not know, child. But I know this. I am confident that the prophets will see the orb return to Bajor. As the lift ascended to Ops, Quark considered once more the possibility of bribery. But Cisco has no price. Damn Starfleet. And damn Bajor, too. Even though he and his brother had not been permitted to speak with First Minister Shakar, Quark realized that such a discussion would likely not have been fruitful anyway. Even Shakar's assistant had been unwilling to accept a bribe. Kai Wynn's security team had also turned down his offers. Quark stepped out of the lift and started around the perimeter of ops toward Sisko's office. With everybody busy, he was hopeful that he could sneak past unnoticed. But Kira caught sight of him. "Is there something I can do for you, Quark?" "Major Kira, I'm here to see Captain Sisko." "For what reason?" "For my reason, and it's none of your business." "Captain Sisko is a very busy man. He can't just stop what he's doing to meet with whoever decides to come up to ops. Which is why I have an appointment to see him." Quark tapped the signal panel beside the doors, willfully not looking back at Kira. Quark entered the office and stopped just inside. Captain Sisko was seated in the chair behind his desk, reviewing the contents of a pad he held in one hand. In his other hand, he clutched a baseball. "You're late, Quark." "Yes, well, you can blame Major Kira for that. She didn't want to let me in here." "I see. Is that why you wanted to see me then? So you could register a complaint against my first officer?" "I'd love to complain, Captain, but for every problem I have with Kira, I'm sure she's got 10 times as many with me." "You're probably right. So, what did you want to see me about?" "It's really very simple. My brother and I don't want to leave Deep Space Nine." In his hands, Sisko spun the baseball around. "Is that all?" "Surely you don't support the Bajoran Edict." "I don't." "Captain, I know you consider yourself a fair man." "Yes, I do, Quark. But I'm afraid I can't help you or your brother in this instance. You must have learned about the resolution the Federation Council passed. They have chosen to view this as solely a Bajoran matter." Quark involuntarily rolled his eyes at the mention of the Federation Council. Though the Federation and the Ferengi Alliance were at peace, Quark knew that the people of the Federation looked down on the Ferengi. Oh, they espoused tolerance and acceptance, but they were hypocrites. Sisko continued. "The Federation resolution makes it clear that I cannot offer my assistance when it has not been solicited. I'm soliciting your assistance. But you are not the leader of the Ferengi Alliance. You have nothing to say about this issue." "That's exactly my point. Why should I be punished for something the Nagus is doing?" That stopped Sisko. "You know, I have to tell you that it surprises me that you and your brother even want to stay on Deep Space Nine. Well, maybe not Rom, but certainly you." "Why is that?" "I just didn't think you were happy here. And frankly, you've never really been what I call an upstanding citizen in our little community." It took a few seconds for the impact of what Sisko had said to strike Quark. But when it did, resentment and anger swelled within him. "Captain, I am your community. 3.5 years ago, you forced me to stay on this heap when I wanted to leave. You demanded I keep the bar open for the sake of your crew's morale, few of whom were very happy to be here, if you recall. You wanted the station to thrive. Oh, I think the wormhole may have had a little something to do with the way the Promenade and DS9 overall has grown and flourished. Until recently, Captain, I barely made enough profit to be able to take care of my little old mother on Ferenginar." "I'm not sure I believe you take care of your mother, Quark. I'm not sure I believe anything you say. You live by your own rules." "Yes, I live by the rules of acquisition, but I also live by your rules. You may not realize it, but I am an important part of your little community. Not to mention that I cater the best parties in the sector." "It occurs to me that this may all be unnecessary. It is possible that the Nagus will permit the Bajorans back in the auction, and therefore, Bajoran space will not be closed to the Ferengi, in which case, you wouldn't have to leave." "Zek isn't going to let them back in the auction." Sisko raised an eyebrow. "Let me ask you this, Quark. Don't you think the right thing would be for the Bajorans to be given possession of their sacred religious artifact? Give them the orb? No. The Nagus owns the orb. He didn't steal it, he purchased it." Sisko sighed. "Look, we're not accomplishing anything here. Even if we were to come to some understanding between ourselves, it would mean nothing to the actual participants." "I agree with you. You talk to Shakar. Tell him you think he should let Rom and me stay on the station. I didn't say that's what I believed. But how can Starfleet, how can you possibly support such a racist policy? I don't see the policy as racist. The Bajoran government is reacting to a specific action taken by the Ferengi. Quark was running out of options. He looked at Sisko, desperately trying to think of another argument to make. Would you talk to Shakar as a personal favor to me? Out of friendship? Sisko laughed aloud. Don't try to sell me that line. We're not friends. I wouldn't be your friend if you paid me. You're right. We're not friends. But I would be your friend if you paid me. I might even be your friend if you applied your vaunted Federation morality to the Ferengi. Sisko's smile evaporated. You're calling me a hypocrite? If it was somebody else who had the Bajoran's orb, Starfleet would be offering to negotiate between the two governments. You would be offering. But in this case, either the Bajorans get the damned orb, or you don't have to put up with the Ferengi and the Bajoran system in the Gamma Quadrant. Quark pivoted on his heel and exited the office, unsure where he was going, or what he was going to do next. Two hours before the Bajoran deadline, Quark did not have a buyer for the bar. Rom, I'm ruined.
Don't worry, brother. You made that great deal a few weeks ago. I'm sure you'll be able to make others.
Don't you understand, you idiot? The reason I was able to make that deal was because of my contacts in this area of space, and my proximity to the Gamma Quadrant and the wormhole. When I start doing business in another location, it'll take me years to establish all the advantages I had from being here.
Well, brother, at least we have each other.
Wonderful. That and 2 slips of latinum will get me a cup of Ractigino. It was early morning, and they were in the bar, and Quark was attempting to contact what he knew would be his last hope of making any kind of profit before the Bajorans made it illegal for him to be here. Rom questioned him.
Are you trying to contact Cousin Gala again?
Yes. Trog told me where I could supposedly find him. Quark operated the comm panel, and the words "establishing link" appeared on the screen. Suddenly, an image replaced the words on the screen. A striking young woman with piercing eyes and a smooth, bald head. She was obviously a Deltan. My name is Quark. I was looking for Gala? I cannot help you. What? Why not? Gala is not available. Does he know you? Yes, absolutely. I'm his cousin. I need his help. He owes me. A voice came from off-screen. I wouldn't exactly say I owe you. Gala, please tell me that's you. A Ferengi male appeared on the comm panel besides the young Deltan woman. Quark, how did you find me here? I think that when you return, you'll discover that Trog is a few bars of latinum richer than when you left. Trog. He's like family. Obviously. He took my money. What is it you want, Quark? Quark explained what had happened, and when he finished, Gala shook his head. Even if I was inclined to buy the bar from you, what would be the point? The Bajorans would take it from me for the same reason they're taking it from you. But listen, this could be the best thing for you. Why not join my business? I don't want to join your business. I want to keep my business. This is not an offer I make every day, or to many people. I just can't join your business. Well, then there's nothing more I can do for you. The image of Gala and his consort was replaced by the words, "End transmission." Over breakfast, Rom observed,
That didn't go so well. Now what, brother?
Now? Now I'm ruined. Quark walked over to the front doors and operated the lock.
What are you doing, brother?
I'm opening the bar. I might as well make the last few strips of latinum I can before the Bajorans come up here and steal my bar from me. 30 minutes later, there were 24 customers in the bar. Dax had entered, and she sat down on the chair next to Rom. Quark came up to her.
What can I get you, Commander?
I don't know. I could use something. I was just going to get something to eat at the Replimat when I saw that the bar was open.
For a limited time only.
An unfriendly voice interrupted.
Quark, what are you doing open?
Quark and Dax spun around to see Kira, standing just inside the doorway.
Did you hear me, Quark? The deadline is up in 90 minutes. Shouldn't you be packing? Don't worry, Major. I'll be gone soon enough.
Not soon enough to suit me. I'm delighted the Deep Space Nine will finally be rid of its infestation. Dax touched Kira lightly on the arm and led her a dozen or so steps away from the bar. Major Kira, I need to speak with you. I just want to stop you before you embarrass yourself any further. Whether you believe it or not, Quark is innocent in this matter. By coming here now, you've gone out of your way to berate Quark. Hardly the kindness and caring that the Bajoran religion advocates. But the fate of the Ninth Orb is at stake. I realize that, Nerys. But is that really a reason to treat Quark, or anybody, so badly? Has Quark ever told you that he's happy that the Ninth Orb isn't on Bajor? No, but he refused to try to persuade the Nagus to reinstate Bajor in the bidding. I know that. But I also know that Quark opposing the Nagus would be like you opposing the Kai. You sound like you're on Quark's side. I'm not on anybody's side, but I honestly think the way you've behaved here is wrong. Kira spun on her heel and paced quickly out of the bar. As Dax returned to the bar, Quark nodded his head in the direction Kira had taken.
She sure looked angry.
Rom nodded.
Mad enough to chew neutronium.
Dax chided Quark. Don't pretend that you didn't hear every word we said.
With such good hearing, Commander, I really couldn't help myself. But there's very little point in chastising me for eavesdropping. Rom and I have to be on our way.
Quark and Rom had already packed up their personal belongings, along with a few particularly useful and valuable items from the bar. If there had been more time, he would have held a sale, but the 3 days leading up to the deadline and his frantic efforts, first to find a way to remain on the station and then to sell the bar, had left him no opportunity to do so. Dax looked at Quark. Where will you be going, Quark?
Alastron 4 for now.
Why did you choose that place?
The only ship departing the station this morning, before the deadline, is an Alastron shuttle headed back to their world.
Are you going to let somebody destroy your business for something that you didn't do?
I don't appear to have much choice, Jadzia. And really, I do have to be going. Last call, everyone. And I do mean last.
From the end of the bar, Quark saw that Morn was gazing at him with an expression that seemed equal parts sadness and terror. Attached to the outside of the docking bay was the Alastron's shuttle. Quark, Rom, and Broik stood on the station side of the hatch with the bags they would be carrying with them. Rom and Broik hefted their duffels and passed through the hatch on their way to the shuttle. Quark lifted his bag as well, but he did not move.
Are you coming, brother?
Quark looked up at Rom, and after a moment, he set his bag back down on the deck. Odo adjusted his movements as he exited the turbolift onto the promenade. He tensed, as best he could, the internal structure of his body, trying to reduce any interior flow of his changeling anatomy. He walked past the Replimat and the other shops on his way to Quark's. As Odo neared the bar, he spied Quark inside the doors. With the exception of Rom, he noticed all of the waiters were new to the bar, and none of them were Ferengi. Broik, who had remained on the station right up until the deadline, had chosen not to stay beyond it.
Quark?
Odo was pleased to see Quark start at the sound of his voice.
Odo, where did you come from? I didn't come from anywhere. I'm always by your side, Quark. How else would I be able to catch you in the act of committing a crime? You haven't caught me yet. You're breaking the law right now, just by being in Bajor's space. And yet, you don't seem to be arresting me. Don't think I haven't thought about it. But the edict that the Bajorans issued is not a matter of station security. Well, you shouldn't sneak up on people. It wouldn't matter whether or not I sneaked up on you if you had nothing to hide, now would it? My life and business are open books. If you ever open your books, I'm sure they'd read like a fairy tale. Odo turned to go. Next time, Odo, make some noise when you come into the bar.
Back in his office, Odo looked up from his console to see Captain Sisko enter, accompanied by a man and a woman. Each wore the apricot-colored uniform of the Bajoran militia. The woman carried a Bajoran pad, while a small instrument pouch was slung on a strap across the man's shoulder.
Constable Odo, this is Lieutenant Carlian and Sergeant O'Neill. Apparently there have been reports from Bajorans living on the station indicating there are several Ferengi aboard Deep Space Nine.
Lieutenant Carlian corrected him.
Not several, Captain. 2 individuals named Rom and Quark.
Carlian handed Odo her pad.
First Minister Shakar himself has signed arrest warrants for all Ferengi in the system.
Odo perused the document on the readout.
All seems to be in order.
Odo looked to Sisko for assistance. The captain motioned toward the door. Odo sighed and turned to pick up a tricorder from atop his console. Reluctantly, he then led Sisko and the 2 Bajorans out of the office.
Right this way, Lieutenant. Sergeant. The bar is just down here on the left.
Quark heard what Odo said. He realized they were coming for him.
Rom, it's time. Morn, you're in charge. Don't drink all the profits.
By the time he and Rom had dashed up the stairs, Quark could make out the sound of a portable sensing device below them. Odo watched as Sergeant O'Neill used the handheld Bajoran scanner to detect any Ferengi life signs.
They're on the deck above us.
Once they had reached the 2nd level, O'Neill paused to confirm his sensor readings.
The readings are fluctuating. What is through here, Captain? Holosuites.
O'Neill theorized.
That may be how they're trying to block our scans.
Carlian stepped up to the holosuite doors, but they did not open.
The doors have been locked. There's a program running in there. Sisko to Chief O'Brien.
Sisko quickly described what they wanted to do. It took only a few moments for O'Brien to make the necessary adjustments to the station's transporter software.
We're ready whenever you are, Captain. But once we put you down inside the anti-resonance field, we won't be able to fix the transporter lock on you to beam you out of the holosuite. That's all right, Chief. Once we're inside, Rom should be able to get us out. Energize.
When Sisko's sight cleared, he saw right away that there was indeed a program running in that holosuite. The 4 officers were standing on a large veranda overlooking a tropical landscape. O'Neill raised his scanner.
They're down on the beach.
O'Neill led the way, and they stopped about 2/3 of the way to the water when they reached 2 lounge chairs. Lying in one lounge chair was Quark. In the other, Rom.
I am Lieutenant Carlian of the Bajoran Militia. I'm informing each of you that you are under arrest.
Quark did not move from the lounge chair.
Captain Sisko, I implore you, this isn't right. I've committed no real crime. According to them, you have.
Sergeant O'Neill opened the pouch he was carrying and removed 2 sets of hand restraints. Quark looked over at his brother, and then they both rose to their feet.
O'Neill ordered them, turn around.
Quark and Rom did as they were told.
Carlian inquired, will we have to wait for your officer to break us out of here, Captain? I don't know. Let's find out. Computer, exit.
Several paces down the beach, the holosuite doors appeared. The group crossed the sand to the doors. Quark and Rom suddenly stopped and turned, each attempting to wriggle free of their captor's grasp. Carlian forced Quark back around. Quark moved forward through the doorway and vanished. Everybody seemed startled but Rom. As Carlian reached for Rom, he too strode through the doorway, and just as mysteriously as Quark had, Rom vanished into thin air. Lieutenant Carlian looked back through the doorway into the holosuite, first at O'Neill, and then at Sisko and Odo. Where are they? Quark stood by the sealed inner hatch with his mouth hanging open. He was dumbfounded. Where's the transport? Rom pulled a pad out of his satchel.
It's supposed to be here, brother.
Quark wrenched the pad from his hands. The list confirmed what Rom was claiming. The transport was supposed to be leaving from this docking bay in 10 minutes. Unless the list is wrong. When did you download this schedule from the station computer?
When you told me to.
I told you that 2.5 days ago. Don't you think that the schedules might have changed between then and now, you idiot? It really was unbelievable, Quark thought. Rom could construct, out of scrap parts, a system to project false Ferengi life signs, and another to conceal their actual life signs, but it could not manage to successfully complete other, simpler chores.
Now what, brother?
Now we try to figure another way off the station and out of Bajoran space. There was only one ship leaving the station within the hour, an Endorian freighter. Of course, true to Quark's luck, the ship was on the opposite side of the docking ring. Quark shut down the control panel. Rom, can you patch into the station's transporter system? Do a site-to-site transport to get us on the freighter?
Well, yes, but I can't do it if we're shielding our life signs. The same interference that blocks the sensors would make it impossible to fix a transporter lock on us.
There was not much choice. Tap into the transporter, Rom. Get us aboard that ship. In ops, Odo noticed it at the same time that Kira did. Lieutenant Carlian, I think we may have something. Transporter contact with the deflectors. Somebody just attempted to beam off the station. Odo studied the data marching across Kira's console. They were unsuccessful. It looks like the transporter signal originated outside Docking Bay 11. Lieutenant Carlian activated her comm badge and relayed it to Sergeant O'Neill the location of Quark and Rom. Before she could finish, Sisko interrupted. Sergeant, this is Captain Sisko. I want you to wait for Constable Odo to arrive before taking any action. Sisko knew that Odo would make sure that the arrest went smoothly. Quark and Rom had begun to transport, but when the beam effect had dissipated, they found that they had gone nowhere. Rom, what happened? Rom operated his pad.
I'd have to locate the transporter logs to find out why we weren't successful.
Well, hurry up. Quark knew time was growing short.
Brother, the deflectors are up around the station.
Wonderful. Now what are we going to do? He did not have to wait long to have his question answered. Odo and a Bajoran lieutenant appeared. Odo told him, Quark, it's over. Carlian stepped up to Quark and gazed down at him. I am Lieutenant Carlian of Bajor. I am informing you, both of you, that you are under arrest. Quark eyed his brother across the breadth of the shuttle. Rom had been completely silent ever since they had boarded the shuttle at Deep Space Nine and started their trip to Bajor. Lieutenant Carlian sat with her back to the bulkhead and kept her eyes trained on Quark. She carried a weapon at her side. Do you really think we're that dangerous, Lieutenant? Since you have a weapon, though, it's possible that we might somehow get possession of it and force you to free us. Now, you're asking yourself, how could we possibly get hold of your weapon?
You're not likely to drop it, are you? And there doesn't seem to be much chance of overpowering you. I know. We could buy your weapon from you.
Shut up, Ferengi.
Is that supposed to be an aspersion? Because it's not. I am a Ferengi. Would you be insulted if I called you Bajoran?
I can be proud to be a Bajoran.
Well, I'm proud to be a Ferengi.
Yes, your culture is so rich. You disgust me.
Are you sure it's me that's disgusting you? Or have you perhaps thought of a price you would be willing to accept?
Carlion's eyes narrowed briefly. I do have a price.
Tell me.
I want the Orb of Wisdom returned to Bajor.
Quark stared at her for a long moment. You could have had the orb, if only your people had possessed some sense of its worth.
Apparently the orb is worth more than your freedom.
Quark closed his mouth. Right now, there was nothing more to say. After the shuttle touched down, Carlion stood from her chair and touched a small control panel.
Are we secure, Sergeant O'Neill?
Not yet. Colonel Mitra wants to meet and inspect the prisoners personally. He should be out shortly. About 5 minutes later, Quark and Rom walked down the shuttle's ramp and out into an overcast Bajoran day. When they stepped off the end of the ramp onto the hard, lifeless soil, Carlion ordered them to stop. Quark looked around and found it difficult to comprehend what was happening. The sky above was uniformly gray, not even a hint of blue. No trees, no mountains or hills, nothing but desolate plains. Closer, he saw a tall wire fence with sentry posts at regular intervals. A line of 5 Bajoran militia officers stood at attention by the end of the shuttle ramp. The one in the middle, a colonel, stepped forward. He was an older man, but solid, with chiseled features. Welcome to Galatet. In his office on Deep Space Nine, Sisko read the entire report again. Something was definitely wrong. Come in. Major Kira entered the office.
You wanted to see me, Captain?
Yes, Major. I've just been going over your report. There are some disturbing numbers in here. 29 vessels slated to dock at Deep Space Nine within the past week, all missing? Any explanation?
No, sir.
Sisko leaned back in his chair. What does Commander Worf have to say about this?
I haven't consulted with him about it. None of the ships we're talking about are Starfleet.
Sisko to Worf. I'd like to see you in my office.
Sisko looked back over at Kira.
Perhaps he can shed some light on this from an intelligence standpoint. Worf entered the office. Commander Worf, please have a seat. I'd like you to take a look at this. Worf took the pad and read through the displayed text.
I take it this is unusual.
Not entirely, but not on such a regular basis. Is there anything you know of, Mr. Worf, that might help us explain this?
There have been no incidents in the sector involving Starfleet vessels, but there have been several rumors about small ships being attacked in nearby space.
A certain possibility occurred to Sisko.
Major, have you spoken with First Minister Shakar recently?
Not in the last few days, no. Why?
Maybe you should see if Bajor has experienced any problems similar to the ones we're having.
Do you know what's going on, Captain?
I have an idea, but it's only speculation. Commander Worf, prepare the Defiant. From the command chair in the center of the Defiant's bridge, Captain Sisko watched his crew work. Dax, stationed at the flight control position. O'Brien was at operations. Worf at tactical. Dax announced,
"We're approaching the Bajoran trade routes."
Sisko looked at Worf. Engage the cloaking device.
Sisko saw Dax glance up from a console. The Romulan Star Empire had agreed to loan the Federation the cloaking device for installation aboard the Defiant, under the condition that it never be used within the Alpha Quadrant. Sisko did not take this stipulation lightly, and he had weighed heavily the possible consequences of whether he was violating the intent of the agreement. The Defiant began tracing the trade route traveling away from Bajor. Worf looked up from Tactical.
I am reading a vessel.
Sisko steadied the main viewer. Magnify. O'Brien looked up. That's an old Earth vessel. Worf, who was an expert at spacecraft classification, nodded.
Its navigational beacon identifies it as the Alarica.
As the Defiant closed on the Alarica, Sisko saw several dark streaks along the main body of the ship. What are those black patches? Worf checked his console.
They appear to be some sort of heat distress. I am picking up some very odd residual energy signatures from them. They almost look like the remnants of phaser fire.
Can you make the attacker, Mr. Worf?
Scanning, Captain. Sensor contact with another vessel. The configuration is Ferengi.
Sisko launched himself up out of his seat. Damn. What type of ship? O'Brien looked up. Definitely a Marauder, sir. A Decorator class. It was the largest, most powerful type of vessel in the Ferengi fleet. And it was what Sisko had feared. Worf worked his controls.
I have another sensor contact. It is another Decorator Marauder.
Sisko shook his head. It's a blockade of Bajor, Sisko thought, which is almost as bad as an attack. Before long, the population of Bajor would be facing starvation. Sisko was in ops when Major Kira had arrived back at Deep Space Nine after a meeting with First Minister Shakar and Kai Wynn. He wants what, Major? I know, Captain. I agree that it's ridiculous. I told Shakar that the Federation Council would never authorize Starfleet to provide Bajor with ships. Of course they won't. These people refuse to negotiate with each other, and yet Zek is prepared to starve the population of Bajor, and Shakar is prepared to wage war with Ferenginar. It would be laughable if the situation weren't so grave. But, Captain, are you going to pass the Minister's request on to the Federation Council? As much as I'd like not to, Major, I don't really see what choice I have. And I'm afraid this will not reflect well on Bajor. What do you mean? What I mean is that this is the type of behavior that will be evaluated as Bajor is considered for admission to the Federation. And wanting to start a war is hardly an indication of a healthy and mature society. Kira's jaw dropped. Bajoran culture has existed for 500,000 years, far longer than the culture of Earth. You're right, Major. Your culture is much older than mine. And in the short history of my people, we have practiced slavery, internal exile, and genocide. But we have evolved from that. Slavery and genocide? What are you talking about? Major, the expulsion of all Ferengi from the Bajoran system because of the actions of one Ferengi, that is unjust. I also think that the Ferengi blockade is wrong. What I fear is that before this mistake is corrected, people will suffer. Kira asked Sisko, did you get permission to ask the Ferengi to let Starfleet transport humanitarian aid to Bajor? Yes. The Federation Council agreed to let me make the request in the name of altruism. Somehow, I don't think there's much chance of altruism persuading the Nagas. We'll see. You're in command of the station, Major. The Defiant flew at full impulse speed, uncloaked on course for the Bajoran trade routes and the Ferengi Armada. The bridge crew was quiet as the Defiant maneuvered into position. Finally, the ship came within viewing range of a Marauder. Worf turned to Sisko.
I have the Ferengi vessel on screen.
Mr. Worf, hail the Ferengi vessel. Let them know that I wish to speak to a representative of Grand Naga Zek. Tell them I have a business proposition for him.
Yes, sir. We are receiving a response.
On the main viewer was the figure of a lone Ferengi officer.
I am Bractor, Daemon of the Marauder Krikta, and commander of this wing of the Ferengi fleet.
Forgive my brashness, Daemon, but I have little time for diplomacy. May I transport aboard the Krikta to meet with you? Worf called before Bractor could respond.
Captain, the Ferengi are not to be trusted. I strongly recommend that you meet with Bractor aboard the Defiant.
Bractor nodded.
Perhaps your officer is right, Captain. I would be willing to beam over to your ship.
As Sisko entered Transporter Room 1, soft white granules of light gathered on the platform. Then Bractor materialized. He was clad in the gray uniform of the Ferengi military.
Daemon, welcome to the Defiant. What I have to say won't take very long. What's the proposition? The requests first. As an official representative of the United Federation of Planets, I am asking Grand Nagus Zek to allow food and medical provisions to be carried by Starfleet vessels through the Ferengi blockade to Bajor.
Bractor's eyes widened as Sisko continued.
I would also like to request that the Nagus delay the completion of the auction for the 9th orb until after the matters of contention between the Ferengi and the Bajorans have been resolved.
Bractor shrugged, seemingly unimpressed.
All right. Now, what's the proposition? I am offering my personal services as a mediator between the Alliance and the Bajoran government to resolve their current set of disputes. That really doesn't sound like much of an offer, Captain. He's already turned down several of their attempts to negotiate. He has not turned down my personal services, nor has anybody promised to maximize the Nagus' profits within the context of mediation. Are you promising that? I am.
Bractor walked back towards the transporter platform.
Very well. I will deliver your message.
Sisko swept his hand across the transporter console, and Bractor was gone. A response came the 5th day. The captain was told to meet Daemon Bractor once more. This time, Sisko traveled alone to the blockade in the runabout Rubicon. Anxious both to complete his business there and to learn the Nagus' response, Sisko made arrangements for Bractor to transport onto the Rubicon. Sisko greeted the Ferengi when he stepped from the two-person transporter at the rear of the runabout's cockpit.
Daemon Bractor, how nice to see you again. I delivered your message, Captain.
He stepped from the transporter and held up an isolinear optical chip.
This is the Nagus' reply. Thank you, Daemon. Wait until you hear the Nagus' response. You may not wish to thank me or remember me.
After Bractor had beamed back over to the Krikta, Sisko slipped the isolinear optical chip into an input receptacle. On a viewer above and to the left of the primary console, the image of Grand Nagus Zek appeared. What the Nagus communicated astonished Sisko. On Bajor, in his office, Shakar sat down next to the small table into which a comm panel was set. He opened a channel to Deep Space Nine. After a moment, the image of Nerys appeared. She smiled when she saw who it was.
I think Captain Sisko may have some encouraging news.
Good news would be a welcome change. She worked her controls, and the Starfleet emblem replaced her on the display. Then Shakar saw Sisko on the screen. Captain, I'm sorry I haven't responded to your message sooner, but things are very hectic at the present time.
I understand, First Minister. I have some news. After an appeal from the Federation Council, Grand Nagus Zek has consented to allow Starfleet vessels, subject to inspection, to ship humanitarian aid through the Ferengi blockade. Shipments should begin arriving on Bajor within 10 days.
Shakar exhaled slowly. That is good news, Captain, but it falls far short of solving all of Bajor's problems with the Ferengi.
That may be true, First Minister, but it certainly is a significant step toward accommodation.
Captain, The humanitarian aid is of enormous importance, and we will welcome it. But Bajor also requires military support. You know that Starfleet cannot provide such support. Perhaps I could function as a mediator between the two sides. Captain, there will be no talks until the 9th orb is on its way to Bajor. Good day. On Deep Space Nine, the first indication of the invaders came from the subspace relay. Dax turned to Kira from her science console in Ops. The communications and sensor relay is picking up an unusual warp signature. The relay, positioned just beyond the mouth of the wormhole in the Gamma Quadrant, continuously transmitted the results of its local sensor scans back through the wormhole to Deep Space Nine. Cisco had been about to enter his office, but now he stopped and walked down to the lower level and over to Kira's station to look at the readings himself. A cluster of lights advanced across the display. Dax looked up. I count at least 35 ships on a direct heading for the wormhole. Whoever they are, hail them. Kira's fingers fluttered rapidly across her controls. There's no response, Captain. Dax then announced, the alien ships are entering the wormhole. Reading elevated neutrino levels. The wormhole is opening. Dark objects emerged from the cosmic whirlpool in a long group. And then the entrance to the wormhole collapsed in on itself. Cisco eyed the lead vessel on the view screen. It was definitely a design unknown to him. Kira turned to Cisco. They're headed in this direction. Weapons? Dax looked up from her console. I'm reading Klingon-style disruptors and Starfleet-style photon torpedoes. Their weapons aren't powered up, and Captain, the ships are passing the station. Kira was suddenly filled with dread. Bajor. Dax confirmed Kira's fear with a nod. Cisco did not hesitate. Major, get me the First Minister, right now. Within seconds of his order, Cisco was looking at Shakar on the main viewer. First Minister, I'm sorry for the urgency, but a squadron of 35 ships has just passed through the wormhole and is on a direct course to Bajor. Their intentions are unknown. The ships are of a type we've never encountered before. The ships are not unknown to me, Captain. Bajor has purchased these vessels for our defense. Rom was cold. In the darkness, he reached up and pinched the bottom of his right earlobe. He felt nothing. Cautiously, he rubbed together the fingers of his raised hand. He heard the noise, but only faintly. Still, that was good. At least he had not completely lost his hearing yet. It was too cold. Winter on Bajor. Winter at Galatep. He raised himself onto his side, trying to find a position in which he could get to sleep. As he turned over, the bunk creaked. Rom stiffened with fear. The barracks were monitored even at night. Moving around after lights out was provocation enough to punish the prisoners. Weary though he was, Rom found that he could not fall back to sleep. He opened his eyes and saw nothing. But he picked out the breathing of 5, 6, 7, all 8 of his fellow prisoners. All Ferengi. 5 of them had been captured in their small cargo ship, attempting to make a run into Bajoran space and through the wormhole after the deadline. Both of the other 2 Ferengi had been on Bajor when they had been discovered and taken into custody. One of them, Quark, had been conducting business on the planet and had not been able to leave before the deadline. The other, Karg, had not even known of the edict. He had retired several years ago to Bajor, where he had lived somewhat reclusively in a modest home in the province of Wintara Mas, painting still lifes and landscapes. As Rom lay huddled in his bunk, the thought of Colonel Mitra filled him with a distress that he had not felt since his youth, when Briel had so thoroughly humiliated him. Mitra humiliated him too, but with a physical pain as well. When they had first been brought to the prison camp, there had been no doubts about their eventual departure. They would be held there until they stood trial for having violated the Bajoran edict. And then one day, things had changed. Colonel Mitra came by the barracks to inform the prisoners that they were no longer being held for trial. The Ferengi would now be detained as political prisoners until the differences between Bajor and Ferenginar had been resolved. The prisoners had been left to the mercy of Galatep and their keepers. How long had they been here now, Rom wondered in the darkness. He wanted to watch his son graduate from Starfleet Academy. He wanted to help his brother achieve the business successes he craved. He wanted to see his mother again. He wanted to go home. The next day, Rom felt like he was walking on knives. His feet were numb, and still he marched. There was no choice, really. Sergeant White was running them today. If Rom did not march, he would be beaten. Suddenly, Rom tripped behind Court. A hand grabbed the back of Rom's neck like a vice. He winced as he felt himself being lifted. White snarled, "On your feet, you big-eared freak." Rom crumbled to the ground, but White's fists shot down and grabbed him by the front of his jumpsuit. There was a moment when he thought he heard his brother's voice.
"Leave him alone!"
And then he was falling again. The back of his head struck the ground, and he fell further into darkness. Rom welcomed it. When Rom awoke, it was night once more. In the dimness, he saw Quark leaning over him. Quark's face was badly bruised. A long gash slanted across his cheek to the bridge of his nose.
Brother, what happened?
You passed out.
I mean, what happened to you? Was it Sergeant White?
Quark nodded his head slowly. When you fell, he was going to beat you. I couldn't let him.
So you tried to stop him, and he beat you instead.
Quark shrugged. I'm tougher than you, and it's my fault we're here. Quark's head spun toward the door. It was Sergeant Argon. To Rom's surprise, Argon held up a pair of shoes. I have new shoes for Prisoner 9. I convinced White that he'd be in big trouble with the Colonel if he found that he marched Prisoner 9 right through the bottom of his shoes. He handed the new shoes to Quark, who took them, cautiously. This is a trick. We know the barracks is monitored. Argon actually smiled. Jessel is monitoring right now. White had to get medical attention after you attacked him. Argon reached behind himself and pulled a small medical kit from the waistband of his pants. This should help both of you. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of pills. These are vitamins. There should be enough for everybody. I'll get the med kit when we bring your food later. Argon crossed the barracks quickly and was gone into the night. Quark opened up the medical kit. Do you know how to use any of these?
Not really, brother. But the scanner will probably have instructions.
Before long, Quark had found the directions. After reading them, he began to work on healing Rom's feet. Rom was moved by his brother's careful attention. He thought again about the moon Quark hoped someday to purchase, and about how Quark wanted to bring him along to garden and keep animals.
Quark, tell me about raising Gibray.
Sisko and Shakar stood facing each other in the First Minister's office. Sisko had rushed there upon learning of Bajor's purchase of the 35 starships that had passed through the wormhole. You're going to destroy Bajor, First Minister. Obviously, I don't think so, Captain. We are under siege. We cannot let the Ferengi have our lands. Minister, Bajor is not under siege. At most, you have a political war, maybe a trade war on your hands. The Ferengi aren't interested in capturing Bajor. All they want is access to the wormhole. And all we want is the orb. Oh, I wish you luck, Minister. Captain, there is another matter I must discuss with you. Are there more ships coming? No.
We purchased what we could without drawing from the treasury. If you didn't use the resources of the treasury, then how did you buy the ships? We acquired them from the Iridians. As far as Cisco was aware, the Iridians regarded themselves as interstellar dealers of information. They certainly did not possess the facilities to construct starships. Shakar looked directly at Cisco. We promised to provide information in exchange for the transports. More precisely, it was access to information. We promised to provide a man named Zilius Voss access to all the data relayed to Deep Space Nine through the wormhole. Cisco was thunderstruck. That data is not yours to sell. It belongs to Starfleet. I disagree, Captain, as do Bajor's legal authorities. I'm sure those of the Federation will as well. You have 5 days from now until Zilius Voss or his representatives arrive to begin monitoring communications from the relay station. And if Starfleet refuses to cooperate? If Starfleet insists on preventing us from doing so, we will have to abrogate their invitation to operate the station. Cisco to the Defiant. One to beam up, Mr. Worf. Back on Deep Space Nine, Cisco called Worf into the conference room and apprised him of Bajor's strategy. Mr. Worf, I want you to take the Defiant to the blockade and seed the area with long-range sensor buoys. If somebody throws a rock out there, I want to know about it.
Aye, sir. And Captain, if I may, you have told me that the starships the Bajorans acquired were transports. But the Iridians do not manufacture vessels of any kind. That would lead us to the conclusion that either the Iridians purchased the ships themselves from another source, or that they merely acted as intermediaries in the deal with the Bajorans.
Cisco stood up and began pacing the room. It's not likely that they were intermediaries. The Bajoran payment of information is a notably Iridian requisite. Worf nodded.
But these ships are defensive transports. Precisely the type of ships the Bajorans would need to make an attempt to run the Ferengi blockade.
Mr. Worf, do you think somebody's manipulating events? Trying to instigate a war between the Bajorans and the Ferengi?
Not just that. They're also trying to weaken the defenses of the station.
Cisco concurred. All of which could leave the wormhole undefended. Worf stated his conclusion.
The Dominion.
Maybe, Mr. Worf. But the Romulans also covered the wormhole, and they are very fond of deceptions and manipulations such as these.
Sir, we must learn where the Bajoran transports came from.
Cisco, to Constable Odo. Meet me in my office in 5 minutes. He turned to Worf. I'm going to have the constable do a little reconnaissance. Right now, your orders stand. I want those sensor buoys positioned along the Bajoran trade routes. Worf spun sharply on his heel and exited the conference room, not stopping until he reached the bridge of the Defiant. Shots were fired. Cisco was in his quarters when Kira contacted him with the news, and he made it to the bridge of the Defiant in 3 minutes. 30 seconds later, docking clamps were released, and the Defiant was pulling away from its berth. As the Defiant grew nearer the scene, Cisco saw on the main viewer 3 vessels, a Ferengi Marauder and 2 Bajoran transports. O'Brien reported from his operations console. The Bajoran ships don't seem to be affected by the phaser hits. They're continuing onward. Cisco and his crew watched as the 2 transports broke from each other, moving to either side of the Marauder. From each of the 4 corners of their forward shields, the disruptors flashed toward the Ferengi ship. Worf announced the results.
The Ferengi deflectors are intact. They sustained no damage at all.
Take us in, Dax. Interpose us between the Marauder and the transports. If the Ferengi fire their plasma weapon, I want the Defiant to take the blow. Cisco saw on the viewer that the Marauder was almost on top of the transports. He did not know why the Ferengi were waiting to fire. Then, without warning, one of the transports dove away out from the Defiant's protective cover. The other transport slid off in the opposite direction of the first. Worf looked up from his console.
Both transports are firing.
The disruptor blasts landed this time on the same spot, near the central aft section of the Ferengi vessel.
The disruptors ceased, and then the fusillade of photon torpedoes emerged from both transports, aimed right at the focal point of the disruptor blasts on the Marauder. Sisko heard Kira say softly, "They don't care if the Ferengi die." O'Brien announced, "I'm reading another power surge in the Marauder. The plasma weapon is discharging within the ship." Sisko understood the horrific implications for the Ferengi. "Can we beam the crew off?" Worf shook his head.
Negative, Captain. Their deflectors are intact. There's massive radiation.
"Hail them! Offer our assistance!" Worf looked up.
No response, Captain.
On the main viewer, Sisko saw the Ferengi vessel die. "Mr. O'Brien, how bad is it?" "Bad. The radiation is making it difficult to get readings. Life support is fluctuating." "Major, how many left alive?" Kira operated the controls at her console. Sisko saw her face turn ashen. "None, Captain." There was silence on the bridge of the Defiant. Dr. Julian Bashir watched as Captain Sisko walked sluggishly back to the command chair and fell into it. Worf seemed puzzled.
The Bajoran choice to bombard the section of the Ferengi vessel that housed the plasma weapon was a wise tactical maneuver, but it should not have worked.
Slowly, Julian made his way over to Kira's console and leaned in and examined the readouts. "Captain, with this type of radiation in such concentrated amounts, I think it's possible that we might be missing something." "Are you suggesting, Doctor, that there might still be people alive aboard that ship?" "It's possible." "What do you recommend?" "I could take a shuttle over. We could breach the deflectors and transport survivors into a quarantine field set up on the shuttle." "Doctor, do it." With Chief O'Brien piloting, the Da Vinci slipped from its berth easily and moved out into space. "So, Julian, what do you think the chances are of finding anybody alive?" "Maybe 5%. Their plan was to penetrate the deflector shields surrounding the Marauder. They would trace a path along the exterior structure of the vessel, with Julian scanning for signs of life. There was a slight shimmy as the shuttle contacted the Marauder's deflectors. Julian reached for the controls to initiate sensor scan. Without warning, the Da Vinci was thrown violently. The interior lights blinked several times, replaced a moment later by the emergency lighting. Before Julian passed out, his gaze passed across the forward windows. The Marauder seemed to be moving away from the Da Vinci. On the Defiant, Dax saw it first. The Marauder is moving. She guessed that the Marauder was probably being maintained automatically to account for the Marauder's drift. The Da Vinci sheared off as the Ferengi vessel adjusted its heading. Sisko did not have to give the order for Dax to set the Defiant in pursuit of the errant shuttle. "Worf, can you raise them?"
There is no response, sir.
Kira reported from the operations console. "The Da Vinci's inertial dampers are fluctuating. Power is unstable. Life support is in and out." "Tractor beam, Mr. Worf." A thin beam of light blue energy lanced out from the Defiant and intersected the toppling shuttle. As Worf increased the intensity of the beam, the shuttle slowed its end-over-end motion. "Transporter room 1. Beam Chief O'Brien and Dr. Bashir from the shuttle directly to sickbay." After a few seconds, Sisko heard a reply. "Transporter room to Captain Sisko. They're aboard." 10 minutes later, the Da Vinci had been hauled back aboard, and the Defiant started in pursuit of the mysterious Ferengi vessel. But they found nothing. Once the Defiant returned to Deep Space Nine, Sisko contacted Braktor aboard the Krikta to inform him of the battle and its result. Braktor appeared on the comm panel. "The Nagus agrees to let Bajor receive medicine and food, in spite of our blockade, and this is how he's repaid?" "Then you know about the encounter with the transports." "Of course we know about the Nemes.
but a Decorac-class Marauder would not require any assistance to defeat 2 of those new Bajoran vessels. I would have sent another ship to fight if I'd known that the Federation was going to become involved.
Are you making an accusation, Damon?
Sensor records show the Defiant entering the field of battle with the Bajoran vessels.
Sisko knew that long-range scans would not have been capable of recording the details of the engagement. What sensor records?
Those from the Nemesis, of course.
You recovered the ship, then?
A handful of survivors did. They brought the Nemesis back to the blockade.
We read no life signs after the battle.
Is that why the survivors reported an attempt to board their ship?
Damon, we were searching for survivors.
I thought you said your scans showed no signs of life aboard the Nemesis.
We were unsure of them because of the high levels of radiation.
We have our own sensor logs, Captain. If a full review of the logs shows that the Defiant was directly involved in the annihilation of more than 250 Ferengi, there will be grave consequences.
The Damon gestured to somebody off-screen, and the communication abruptly ended. For a couple of minutes, Sisko stood and stared at the Ferengi emblem on the comm panel. Sisko to Commander Worf. I want you to find out all you can about the Ferengi Marauder, Nemesis. There was no one in the hold to see the cargo container melt. The cube, like several others about it, was apparently headed for Johnson City on Gamma Hydra 4, carrying a shipment of handmade Bajoran Murniri dolls. The container lost its solid form, liquefying into humanoid form. Odo did not hesitate, but raced to a computer station. Odo worked the controls with his 14 digits and looked at the manifests for the other holds, at the crew roster, at the depressurization instructions for certain cargoes. Abruptly, Odo's many fingers stopped their frenzied movements across the console of the computer station. He rapidly evaluated the path he would have to take to reach what he wanted to inspect. And there it was, in among the base entries, a clue that pointed to somebody other than the Iridians as the source of the transports. The language, in which the computer both accepted input and produced output, was Bajoran. But the default language setting had been overridden. The setting was neither Bajoran nor Iridian. What it was made no immediate sense to Odo, but he had hopes that it was the key Sisko had sent him to find. After his return to Deep Space Nine, Odo reported his discovery to Sisko and the crew. The Karma, you say? The notion that the Karma provided ships to the Bajorans, or even the Iridians. Kira shook her head. It doesn't fit. As far as we know, the Karma have no trade agreements with the Iridians. Worf added,
Nor do the Karma manufacture starships.
Sisko's head had begun to pound. Sisko thought, is there something here, or are we just looking for light in a black hole? He turned to face his crew. Can we conclude that somebody is trying to manipulate the Bajorans into a battle with the Ferengi? Dax agreed. It looks that way, Benjamin. Worf weighed in.
It is unlikely that any such plot would be masterminded by the Iridians or the Karma. For one thing, neither have the military capability of occupying Bajor or defending the wormhole.
Sisko gazed around at his officers. Then obviously it must be somebody else. Sisko knew that the problem was that the potential culprits were plentiful. The Founders, the Klingons, the Cardassians, the Romulans, even the Tholians. Sisko was therefore surprised when a possible answer arrived with Chief O'Brien. Chief, how are you feeling after your tumble through space? Still a little bit like I've been hit in the head by a runabout. You said you'd be late because you're investigating something. Yes, sir. I decided to check the Da Vinci sensor logs, and sure enough, before the Marauder moved away, the sensors were functioning. For almost the last 20 hundredths of a second, the log reflected expected levels of radiation, and a crew complement of 271 healthy Ferengi. My best guess is the first set of readings, the one indicating a wrecked ship, was counterfeit. Kira looked puzzled. So why would the Ferengi want us to think the transports had beaten the Marauder and killed its crew? Sisko moved over to the table and leaned over it. The Ferengi staged this battle to make it appear as though the Bajorans were instigating the fighting. Dax agreed. So, if they choose to, they can use this incident as justification to attack Bajor itself. Sisko nodded. Oh, I think they'll attack. This is the one way the Ferengi believed they could be absolutely sure that the Federation wouldn't defend Bajor, if the Bajorans themselves were the aggressors. The chief took a step toward the table and held a pad he was carrying out to Sisko. Well, that might explain this, then. This arrived from Starfleet just before I came down here. It's the report Mr. Worf requested on the Ferengi marauder Nemus. It says that the starship Nemus is one of Grand Neka Zek's personal honor guard. Rom lay on the hard surface of his bunk, shivering. Snows had buried the brittle land, and daylight hours had grown short. But it was not the cold that shook Rom so violently right now. It was fear. White had said that he was taking Quark to see Colonel Mitra. Quark had been gone for a while, and as his time away from the barracks increased, so too did Rom's conviction that he would never return. Mitra had begun having his sessions with each of the prisoners. It was, Rom feared, where Quark was now.
Be strong, brother. Be strong.
It was remarkable, Rom reflected, that none of them had yet taken ill. He supposed that their relatively good health was probably a result of the vitamins regularly smuggled to them by Argon and Jessel. Rom and Quark had approached Argon and Jessel several times, soliciting their assistance. As it turned out, Rom and Quark learned that the guards were as much prisoners here as the Ferengi. Ordered here by the colonel for a 6-month tour of duty, they were not allowed to leave the camp for any reason at any time. As Rom considered his brother's situation, the bunk door suddenly flew open. There stood Sergeant White with a wide, mirthless smile. Wow, look, everybody's awake.
Where's my brother?
The sergeant bounded across the room. He stopped at Rom's bunk and yanked him to his feet. You want your brother? I'll take you to see your brother. As White loped back towards Mitra's building, Rom was forced to vault along through the gusting winds of winter. This was it. Mitra had killed Quark, or had White do it, and now he was going to kill Rom. White opened the door, then grabbed the front of Rom's jumpsuit with both hands and threw him inside. Colonel Mitra spoke from further inside the building. Prisoner 9, would you care to join me? Rom pulled himself up, and Sergeant White pushed him. Rom closed his eyes and turned through the doorway into the room. When he opened them, Quark was there, in the center of the room, dead. His body was slumped in a heavy wooden chair, his arms bound to the chair's arms. His face had new injuries, and old ones reopened. Rom felt his own face contort with grief.
Brother.
Mitra stood behind a desk. Sergeant, won't you bring another chair out for prisoner 9? Mitra sat down behind his desk. Do you know why you're here, prisoner 9? Rom shrugged.
To die?
Mitra looked at him, blinked. No, you are here to assist me in obtaining what I want. The 9th orb of the prophets. But there is almost nothing I can threaten or offer. Except in your case, prisoner 9. There is a prophet I can offer. The colonel walked out from behind his desk and looked down at Rom. You believe I killed your brother? Rom nodded in White's direction.
Or told him to.
Mitra walked away from the desk, away from Rom. The colonel stood behind Quark. I have killed tonight,
But this I would not touch. This is a wretched being like yourself, Prisoner 9. A lowly, vile Ferengi. He, you, your people, do not deserve their world. We will annex it, bring it into the Empire.
The Empire?
Rom wondered if he'd heard the Colonel correctly.
The Bajoran Empire?
Mitra looked over at White and nodded, then nodded down at Quark's body. White walked over to Quark. Rom could not actually see the blow, but it was obvious that Quark had been struck in the face. Rom came out of his seat, rage filling him.
Bind him, Sergeant White.
White was on Rom quickly, tugging his arms down and securing him to the chair. As Rom looked at Quark, he saw that color had flashed into Quark's face where he'd been struck.
Could that happen if he was dead?
Quark lifted his head and opened his eyes.
Brother!
White's bare knuckles smashed into the side of Rom's head. It hurt, but Rom did not care. All he could do was stare at his brother, alive, and cry. The Colonel indicated Quark with a glance.
This is what I have to offer you in the way of profit.
Rom chose his words with care.
I'll do whatever I can.
Very wise, Prisoner 9. Perhaps you can give me the name of the guard who has been providing vitamins to the prisoners.
I've been stealing the vitamins myself.
Mitra paused, then walked a half-circle around Quark to stand in front of Rom.
You lied to me to protect Sergeants Argon and Jessel?
Before Rom could prepare himself, Sergeant White's arm swept around his neck. He felt his eyes widen as he lost the ability to breathe.
Now then, Prisoner 9, I understand that you are attached in an emotional way to your right hand.
Rom looked at Quark. Mitra had obviously extracted personal information from him, including this select tidbit from Rom's youth on Ferengi.
Go ahead, Colonel. Take my hand.
I will. I believe I'll have it shipped to Ferengi, to Mugi.
Rom betrayed nothing.
I'm sure she'd like to have reminders of her sons. Why don't you take my heart, too?
Your heart? Perhaps, but not yet. I think perhaps one of Prisoner 8's ears.
Rom's heart pounded heavily in his chest.
Quark's ear. Anything but the ears.
White entered a nearby file room. He returned shortly with a Bajoran phaser pistol in his hand.
No, Sergeant. Not that way.
Mitra walked into the file room and returned carrying a long knife. Mitra handed the knife to White, who took it and stuffed the phaser into the waistband of his uniform. White made his way behind Quark and laid the blade of the knife against the flange of Quark's right ear. Suddenly, Quark's head dipped down and his legs thrust onto the floor, sending his chair hurtling backward into White's midsection. White struck the wall. Shaken, White started to come forward. Rom did not hesitate. He rocked forward onto his feet and surged across the room. He pounded his head into White's chest. The burly sergeant's head slapped into the wall with a sickening crack. Rom heard the phaser clatter to the floor. He spun quickly past White's slumping body, sending his chair crashing into the wall. The old wooden chair burst apart at its joints. Rom's arms came free. He saw Mitra coming around the desk at him. Rom scrambled until he saw the phaser pistol just on the other side of White's sprawling form. Rom dove over the sergeant and grabbed it. He pointed the phaser at the colonel. Mitra smiled.
Let's see if you really have any courage. None of you Bajorans do. You and your people are just an inconvenience to us, although I must say, we do enjoy having you here at Galatep.
Stop, or I'll shoot you.
That phaser is calibrated to kill Rom, so go ahead, shoot.
Rom was no killer. When he glanced down at the setting on the phaser, Mitra slapped the phaser out of Rom's hands. Mitra grabbed Rom and threw him across the room into the far wall. He was unconscious before he hit the floor. When Rom came to, the first thing he heard was water splashing. Rom? Rom, are you all right? The second thing was his brother. Are you all right, Rom?
Oh, yes, brother.
Rom was sitting on the floor of Mitra's office, his back to the wall. Quark was next to him. Both his hands and his feet were bound. So were Quark's. Sergeant White lay where he had fallen. Rom saw that a pool of blood, almost black, had spread beneath his head. Colonel Mitra was behind his desk, standing over the metal basin. Mitra's hands, arms, and chest had been scraped raw. The flesh was beginning to ooze blood. As Mitra cleaned himself, he talked in a constant stream. Lowly Bajorans, glory of Cardassia. What do they think?
What's he doing, brother?
I don't know and I don't care. But I think he's gonna kill us. I don't even think he knows we're here anymore. No, I know you're here. And when I finish cleaning your vile putrescence from my body, yes, it will be your time. You will die slowly and painfully for your ill-considered attempt to defeat Gul Mitra. He's insane. I'm not insane. You don't know what it's like to run this place, to have to deal with inferior creatures like yourself. And then a suspicion came into Rom's mind.
You were a prisoner here yourself during the occupation, weren't you, Colonel Mitra?
Mitra resumed his scrubbing. The door to the corridor started to open. Rom and Quark both looked up, startled. Corporal Prana walked into the room, looking ashen and shaky. Rom saw his gaze travel first to the dormant form of Sergeant White, then to Mitra, and lastly to himself and Quark. Colonel Prana, I'm delighted to see you. I see that. What happened to Sergeant White? The prisoners killed him. And Jessel and Argon? They killed them too. Rom shuddered as he realized that the other two guards had been murdered. That must have been what Mitra had meant when he had spoken of having killed tonight. Prana glanced down again at Rom and Quark. What are you doing, sir? I'm purifying myself once more. And then I'm going to kill the prisoners. Prana walked over to the desk and picked up Mitra's phaser. Well, yes, Sergeant. If you want to kill them now, that's fine. I've had enough of them. Prana turned and faced Rom and Quark. He stood there, looking at the two Ferengi for what seemed to Rom like a very long time. Mitra finally gave the order. Fire, Corporal! Fire! And, to the utter shock of Quark and Rom, Prana turned the phaser on Mitra and pulled the trigger. As Odo followed Sisko into his office, Sisko sat down and gestured to a chair. Have a seat, Constable. What can I do for you? Major Kira briefed me about the First Minister's reaction to our findings. Earlier today, Sisko had contacted Shakar to discuss what Chief O'Brien had learned from the Da Vinci sensor logs. Unexpectedly, the First Minister had received the information regarding the possibility of a staged battle out on the trade routes, as though it were of no importance. Shakar's reaction was disappointing, and the Federation Council's wasn't much better. If the Bajorans won't listen, and the Federation won't listen, then I don't know who will. Perhaps the Grand Nagus will, Captain. I already attempted to change Zek's mind once,
and you were successful. But actually, it wasn't you I was thinking should speak with the Nagus, but Quark. He has a relationship with the Nagus, and he has an intimate, detailed knowledge of both the Ferengi and the Bajorans. Constable, I didn't know you had so much respect for Quark. I don't believe I would choose the word respect. I recognize Quark's abilities. He's a businessman, if not a good Ferengi businessman. Oddly enough, he is persuasive. Yes, he is that, Constable. I'll consider it. Odo nodded in his stiffly formal manner and left the office. Sisko knew that even if they could convince Quark to do this, of which there was no guarantee, Quark was still in jail on Bajor. At least, Sisko thought he was still in jail on Bajor. The truth was, with all that had been happening, he had not thought about Quark in quite some time. Kira arrived on Bajor at the Great Assembly earlier than she needed to, and the officer of the assembly requested that she wait in the adjoining anteroom until it was time for her to speak. Captain Sisko had shown up at her quarters last night unannounced and asked if he might talk with her. She had listened calmly as the captain had outlined his plan. Even if she was able to convince the Bajoran government to release Quark, what assurance did they have that he would agree to speak with the Nagus? The captain had argued that they now had something of value to offer Quark in exchange for his cooperation: his freedom. Kira had not found the captain's arguments to be very compelling, but she had contacted Shakar and entreated him to grant her an emergency audience in the Great Assembly. When Kira had informed the captain, he had been pleased. Still, she thought it was unlikely that the Bajoran leaders would want to set Quark free. The door to the anteroom opened, and the officer of the assembly told Kira, "They're ready to hear your petition now." When Kira reached the assembly hall, she approached the rostrum. Shakar rose from his chair to greet her. A lot of the ministers and Vedics felt they couldn't leave their people right now. The food shortage is more acute in some places than in others. But we do have a quarrel. Shakar walked to the front of the dais and introduced Kira, then took his seat beside Kai Wynn. "I have come here today to propose a course of action that I think might bring an end to our troubles with the Ferengi. It might also bring the Ninth Orb back to Bajor." Kira watched as several people turned to exchange glances with those seated near them. She had apparently gotten their attention. "There is a man incarcerated on Bajor, a Ferengi. This man's name is Quark. This man, Quark, has a relationship with Grand Nagus Zek. The emissary asked me to come here today. Captain Sisko himself intends to escort Quark to Ferenginar. He will see to it that Quark meets with Grand Nagus Zek to try to convince the Nagus to allow Bajor to purchase the orb." And that was it. Nothing would carry more weight than the word of the emissary and his planned involvement to help Bajor. Shakar looked at Kira. "Are you finished, Nerys?" "I don't think there's anything more I can say." Shakar turned to the assemblage. "Major Kira has given us an alternative." Shakar stopped talking. Kira followed his gaze to the back of the hall. Shakar's assistant was rushing toward the dais. Out of breath from running, the assistant panted, "You have an urgent message, Minister. It's from Grand Nagus Zek." On Deep Space Nine, Sisko had Major Kira's communication
put right through to his office.
Major, I hadn't expected to hear from you quite so soon.
Captain, I'm in Shakar's office. He asked me to contact you. He just received a message directly from the Nagus. I'll play you the message. It's brief. Sisko watched as Kira operated the comm panel in Shakar's office. After a moment, Kira's image was replaced with that of Grand Nagus Sex.
First, Minister Shakar Edan of Bajor. This is Grand Nagus Sek of the Ferengi Alliance. In light of the recent provocations Bajor has made to Ferenginar, including the expulsion of Ferengi nationals from your star system, the closing of your borders, and the Gamma Quadrant wormhole to Ferengi nationals, and the brutal attack by 2 Bajoran starships on a Ferengi starship, causing the loss of all hands, and witnessed by the Starfleet vessel USS Defiant, I am informing you that as of the current star date, Ferenginar declares war on Bajor.
As Quark, Rom, and Corporal Prana had attempted but failed to save White's miserable life, Prana recounted how he had been on sentry duty during the night, and Jessel had been late to relieve him. Prana had felt tired enough to risk Colonel Mitra's wrath by leaving his post, and had gone back to the guards' barracks seeking his replacement. When he arrived there, he found Jessel was lying face up in his bunk, the picture of sleep, but his bedclothes were mantled in blood. Prana glanced over at Argon in his bed and viewed a similar sight. Prana told Quark and Rom that ever since word had arrived that the prisoners would not stand trial and were to be held indefinitely, Colonel Mitra had descended steadily into madness. Trapped here themselves, the guards had conspired to desert Galatep and bring back help. Clearly, Mitra must somehow have learnt of their plotting. After Quark and Rom had listened to Prana's story, the 3 men tramped quietly over to the prisoners' barracks and discovered that the other Ferengi internees were alive. The first thing they did was to break out food from the supply. Then, after eating, Prana got new jumpsuits and shoes for all of them. It was decided that all of the internees, but for Quark and Rom, who were exhausted, would search the camp for a means by which to escape from Galatep. The primary objective would be to locate any kind of communications equipment. Quark rested soundly for 6 hours, and would have continued had he not been awakened by Borit, who told Quark that in their search for communications, he had cautiously entered Mitra's building with 2 of his shipmates, Dryon and Lenk. The 3 scoured the entire place and finally made their way to the office. According to Borit's description, there were 2 significant differences between the scene they surveyed and the one that Quark, Rom, and Prana had left. First, a knife had been driven deep into Sergeant White's chest and through his heart. Second, Mitra had vanished. Prana quickly checked the phaser with which he had shot the colonel. He was surprised to find that it had not been set specifically to kill. A reinspection of Mitra's building and office revealed no clues of where the colonel might have gone. They had not found his tracks in the snow around the building. Bowing to the fear that he had inspired in them, the 10 men agreed to travel through the camp in groups of no less than 5. And when they slept, 2 men should stand guard. In Ops, on Deep Space Nine, Dax reported from her station. According to the readings from the long-range sensor buoys, the Marauders are retreating. Sisko was standing on the lower level and listening as his crew issued their reports. Not retreating, Dax. Regrouping. What about the Bajoran ships? Kira looked up. Along with the 35 new ships, various others, smaller cargo ships, are congregating in orbit. Dax worked her console. We've got an incoming message, Benjamin. It's Starfleet Command, Admiral Watley. Send it through to my office. Sisko sat down at his desk and activated the tabletop comm panel. Admiral Watley looked extremely tired. This isn't good news, is it, Admiral? I'm afraid it's not, Ben. I have the unfortunate task of ordering you to evacuate all Starfleet personnel from Deep Space Nine within the next 14 hours. That's not a lot of time. I don't want to desert the people of Bajor precisely when they need us the most. I know, Ben. Nobody has championed the cause of Bajor entering the Federation more than I have. But I guess I don't have to remind you of our responsibilities to the Federation Council. Is the Council committed to this retreat? It is. And Starfleet Command concurs. We can't fight a war for Bajor. And the wormhole, Admiral? If the Ferengi defeat the Bajorans, then we'll have to negotiate with the Alliance about defending the wormhole. It would be in their own best interests. So, Ben, it's over. Watley out. Sisko thought, how could I have failed? I'm the emissary. I'm supposed to save the people of Bajor, not abandon them to the fates of war. Sisko rose from his chair without knowing exactly where he was going to go or what he was going to do. At Galatep, it was late afternoon, and in one of the guards' barracks, Quark lay in one of the bunks. He was observing from a distance Rom's attempts to modify one of the medical scanners so that it could be used to broadcast a distress signal. Nearby, Bort and Karg were playing a card game of some sort. Rom's solemn efforts with makeshift tools that were hardly suited to delicate electronics work were frequently very funny. More than once, a tool or a part had been projected halfway across the width of the room. But with each failure, Quark and Rom and everyone else marooned there came no closer to escaping that terrible place. And then, Court stepped away from his shadowy corner of the barracks and walked over to where Quark was resting. I've been successful, Quark. I've managed to modify the scanner to send a homing signal. Quark sat up and dropped his feet over the side of his bunk. A homing signal? To send to who? Not to who. To what? My ship. The shuttle that brought me to Bajor for business. You expect your shuttle to still be in orbit after so long? My shuttle's not in orbit. It's on the surface of Bajor. Rom pointed to Quark's handiwork.
What is all of that? It doesn't look like it's just a scanner.
It's not. I also used parts from one of the phasers. Rom moved forward.
Oh, that was a good idea. Can I see what you've done? Maybe we could adapt it to also send out a general distress call.
No, this'll work. And we don't want to get out of here so that we can be put in some other Bajoran prison camp. Karg nodded.
He's right. If we send out a distress signal and somebody receives it, they'll call in the Bajoran militia.
Court looked at Rom. If this doesn't work, if my shuttle doesn't arrive here by tomorrow, then whoever wants to can take this device and modify it however they want to. Rom shrugged.
Oh, that seems fair.
Quark was not sure what everybody else was thinking, but he discovered that he was beginning to genuinely believe that Quark's shuttle might arrive. That night, a sound roused Quark. He threw back the covers and lunged from his bunk. All of the Ferengi were awake. Only Prana was still asleep, and as Quark started toward him, the Bajoran rolled over and blinked his eyes blearily open. "Prana! It's the shuttle!" Yesterday, when Prana had learned about Quark's shuttle, he told everybody that they could not do this. They were prisoners, and they were still in his charge. Prana was beset from just about all sides, but Quark and Rom said little. It remained fresh in their minds that Prana had saved their lives. Suddenly, Prana quieted and proceeded to apologize for his earlier outburst, that he had reacted without thinking. But he would willingly support whatever method they could devise for leaving Galatep, even if that meant leaving Bajor as well. Now, as Quark turned from Prana, he ran to the door and threw it wide. There, perhaps 50 meters up, directly above the barracks, was the ship. Quark rushed back inside, looked for Court, and spotted him in the corner. "Court, your shuttle's here!" As Quark watched, a transporter beam enveloped Court. In a moment, he was gone. Quark felt panic clutch at him. He raced back through the open doorway. As they all watched, the shuttle began to descend. The ship, Quark was surprised to see, was of Bajoran design, which was why it could travel across Bajor without eliciting undue attention. The main hatch opened. Court appeared with a broad smile. "Now boarding." The shuttle climbed through the atmosphere of Bajor, and relief rushed over Quark. Quark's shuttle was fairly small. With 10 people inside, the ride was cramped. The shuttle was ascending at a steep, though manageable, angle. They had already cleared the cloud layer of Bajor, and the panoply of stars beckoned. As they continued upward, Corporal Prana asked to be transported down to his home. But a consensus was reached that Prana should stay with the Ferengi until they were completely out of the Bajoran system. The corporal accepted the collective decision without argument. Court tapped a control.
Firing boosters.
After a short burn, the shuttle steadied in its course. Quark peered through the forward window and saw a small Bajoran freighter. But then, he saw that there was another ship beyond the freighter. And there was a third ship. And a fourth. Court turned to Quark.
Don't worry. They're not here for us. They're preparing for war.
War? With who?
You didn't think the Alliance would just allow the Bajorans to jail Ferengi citizens or ban them from using the wormhole, did you?
Behind Quark, some of the others were asking questions, wanting to know what Court knew and how he knew it. Court ignored the questions and concentrated on what he was doing.
We need to come about. We'll be fine if we don't draw attention to ourselves.
As the ship changed course, Quark saw more and more vessels amassed about Bajor, mostly small freighters, a few passenger shuttles, and... Quark did a double-take. But by the time he looked the second time, the ship he thought he had seen was gone from view. Had it been one of those new transports meant to be sold to the Iridians? Quark suddenly felt ill.
Am I ruined?
Tarkin called to Court.
How long will it take us to get out of Bajoran space?
Court named a figure, then added,
We have a shortcut, the wormhole. There's a base on the other side of the wormhole in the Gamma Quadrant. My friends have a ship there. A starship, not a shuttle. I'm sure we can arrange to take everybody wherever they need to go.
Satisfied with Quark's plan, they all grew silent. Quark looked forward and saw that their course appeared clear of any vessels. Somewhere up ahead, he knew, lay the wormhole. The best thing for him to do might be to start all over again in another quadrant.
So much for ever owning my own moon.
Suddenly, Everybody was thrown about the cabin. A gas of some sort, a coolant, was venting with a deafening hiss into the passenger compartment. Quark bellowed above the noise.
There's a crack in one of the drive shells. We hit a mine! We're losing deuterium!
The shuttle bucked, and a mass of bodies surged forward. Quark thought the shuttle was coming apart. There was a flash of light, and Quark screamed,
Brother!
And then they were gone. Sisko sat in the command chair in the center of the Defiance bridge, not long after the evacuation of Starfleet personnel from Deep Space Nine. Worf looked up from tactical.
Captain, sensors just detected an explosion in nearby space.
An explosion of what, Mr. Worf?
There is a trail of deuterium leading away from the explosion. I think there may be a ship in trouble out there. By configuration, it is a small Bajoran passenger shuttle.
Set a course for them. Full impulse. We may not be permitted to get involved in a war, but we can at least render aid to a ship in distress. At the con, Dax complied with the order. Mr. Worf, are they reporting any casualties?
No, sir.
How are their life signs?
The deuterium stream is making it difficult for the sensors to pick out individual life forms, but there are approximately 8 to 12 people on board.
Can we get a transporter lock on them? O'Brien looked up. We should be able to perform a wideband retrieval for all humanoid life. Do it. Dax, once the Bajorans are aboard, I want you to take us back to Deep Space Nine. After Dr. Bashir administers treatment to whoever needs it, we'll transport them down to the station and resume our course to Starbase Icarus. Mr. Worf, engage the tractor beam. We'll tow the shuttle back to the station for our guests. Transporter room to Captain Sisko. Sisko here. What is it, Ensign? Have you got the crew of the shuttle? Oh, we've got them all right, sir. I think you'd better get down here. There were 9 Ferengi, 1 Bajoran, and innumerable questions, but never before had Sisko been so happy to see Quark. The Ferengi stood huddled together in one corner of the transporter room, whispering to each other. Their ride must have been rough, Sisko decided, because he saw bruises and cuts on every face. Sisko told the ensign at the transporter controls, "When they're all settled, accompany each of them, one by one, to sickbay so that Dr. Bashir can treat them." As they left the transporter room, Sisko called out to Quark, "I'd like you to stay here for a moment. I really have nothing to say to you, Captain. Let me ask again, then. Would you please stay here so that you and I can talk?" Quark froze. The word please seemed to have some effect on him. Quark told his brother, "Go to sickbay, Rom. You really need to have your face worked on. I'll be there shortly." Quark watched Rom go, then turned and regarded Sisko. "I want political asylum for my brother and me. Just the 2 of you? What about the rest of your friends? They can do whatever they want to do. I'm just asking for Rom and me." "Quark, we've spoken before about the Federation Council's resolution with respect to the current troubles between the Bajorans and the Ferengi. The resolution is still in effect, and I know you understand it." "Of course I understand it." He pointed a finger up at his face. "These cuts and bruises were given to me by that resolution. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean." Sisko hesitated and took a moment to look more closely at Quark. He saw that, while 1 or 2 of the wounds on his face appeared fresh, others were in various stages of healing. Quark's features were drawn. No, they were gaunt. "Quark,
Do you want to tell me what happened to you?
Quark waved away the matter of his injuries.
I'm just saying that I don't care about the resolution. My brother and I are political refugees. We demand that the Federation provide us protection. You demand. You break out of jail, abduct a Bajoran national, and steal a Bajoran shuttle? Are you interested in facts, Captain? I didn't kidnap that Bajoran. He came with us willingly. And I don't think the shuttle was stolen either. But you did escape from prison.
Sisko watched Quark, and, mixed in with the laughter, he thought he saw tears. The Ferengi was breaking down right in front of him.
Do you want to know where I escaped from? Galatep.
Sisko gasped. What Quark was saying was unthinkable. The Galatep forced labor camp was for all of Bajor a powerful symbol of the pure evil embodied in the Cardassian occupation. Sisko thought, no, this could not have been.
Captain, they sent us to the place they hate more than any other. So much for the deep spirituality of the Bajoran people.
And then, a terrible question occurred to Sisko. Why didn't I know about this? The answer he found was even more terrible. He had not thought about Quark much after he had been taken from the station. Not until Quark's help had been needed.
All right, Quark. Asylum.
Slowly, Quark headed for the door. Sisko called after him.
Quark, I need your help. You want my help? You mean like the way you helped me when I came to you? I don't even know how long ago it was, because I've been beaten just about every day since then. I'm genuinely sorry about that. You don't like me, Captain. And Kira doesn't like me. And O'Brien and Bashir and Worf. And none of you even really know me. To you, I'm just a short and greedy Ferengi. I'm never just Quark to you. I'm always a Ferengi. And aren't we all just humans to you? Maybe you wouldn't be humans if you didn't look down on me from a distance. You may be right. You are right. At least about some of the things you've said. So, what does that mean? It means... Oh, I don't know what it means. Perhaps I can take you to a baseball game in a holosuite sometime. How can you watch those holo programs? They're so boring. Maybe you'll invite me to dinner, where I don't have to serve.
There was a lull, and it seemed as though the conversation had ended. But it could not end, Sisko knew. Not yet.
Quark, you and your brother have asylum. I'll grant it to all the Ferengi. And I think I can offer you a better deal than asylum. A profitable deal.
Quark's eyes widened.
I'm listening. Quark, it's for the people of Bajor and the people of Ferenginar. Listen, why should I care if the Alliance goes to war with Bajor? Let's think this through. Let's say the Alliance is victorious. Then the Ferengi will take over Deep Space Nine. Do you believe that the Nagus will give the bar back to you? And if the unlikely happens, and Bajor wins the war, they'll never return your bar to you.
Quark began to pace around the room.
I need time to think about this. There's no time. The Ferengi fleet will be here soon. What about the Council's resolution? The resolution is a wonderful guideline, but it's not appropriate to follow any decision blindly. Isn't there a rule of acquisition to cover this?
Quark smiled.
There's a rule of acquisition to cover everything, Captain. But that doesn't mean one's always got to be applied.
After Quark saw Dr. Bashir, who treated his injuries, Odo escorted him to his quarters.
You seem to be in a good mood, Quark.
Quark was about to disagree when he realized that he was in a good mood. He had escaped being imprisoned on Bajor, and he was now in a position where he would receive either asylum or amnesty. There was also a chance, a very small chance, but still a chance, that he would be able to get his bar back. And he was also pretty sure that his liquid assets were still intact. Quark had asked Sisko about the transport he thought he had seen in orbit about Bajor, and the captain had told him that it was one of the squadron of starships that the Bajorans had purchased. When Quark had asked the origin of the ships, Sisko had said that he believed that they had initially come from the Karama, further evidence that the ship that Quark had seen was not one of the ones involved in the deal he had brokered.
You're right, Odo. I am in a good mood. I must be happy to see you. So, Quark, do you know what you're going to say to the Nagus when you get to Ferengi?
Quark looked up at Odo.
This was your idea, wasn't it? You must have been the one to suggest my involvement in this mission. Did you suggest that I should be the one to talk with the Nagus because you thought I'd be successful? Or because you wanted to see me fail? Maybe even get into trouble with the Ferengi Commerce Authority? That's the problem with always making deals, Quark. You can be certain of your enemies' identities, but do you know who your friends are?
Quark found Odo's question cryptic. What did he mean? Surely he was not claiming to be Quark's friend, was he? They arrived at Quark's quarters. In the small star cabin stood Rom. Quark left Odo and went inside.
Brother, I need to tell you something. I think we were set up by Court.
Are you out of your mind, Rom? Court saved us, you idiot.
But he didn't make a homing device. When we got in the shuttle, I found the device he supposedly put together near the back of the cabin. It was just a mass of parts from a medical scanner and a phaser. They had been connected together, but they didn't make anything that functioned.
But then how did he call the shuttle?
I don't know. But don't you think it's a pretty big coincidence that right after we escaped from Bajor, we were picked up by the Defiant?
Are you suggesting that Court is working with somebody from the station? Somebody on the Defiant?
I don't know, brother. Maybe somebody from the station.
Who? Sisko, maybe?
If Court had voluntarily stayed in the camp on Bajor when he had the capability of calling his shuttle and escaping at any time, then Quark was sure that he would have to have been paid extremely well. And Sisko would not have been able to do that. There was somebody who obviously could pay well. Grand Nagus Zek. But why would the Nagus want them to escape and be picked up by the crew of the Defiant? Where was the profit for Zek? No, it made no sense for it to be the Nagus. But who? Using the cloaking device, the Defiant flew at maximum warp. On the bridge's main viewer, a tactical display showed the Ferengi Armada, scores and scores of ships. Sisko turned to Dax.
Can you punch us through undetected?
Dax looked up from the con.
I think so. We should be able to sneak through. Do it, and head us towards Ferengi.
Sometime later, Sisko looked over to see Quark entering the bridge.
Quark, are you ready? Does it matter, Captain?
Sisko locked eyes with him.
Yes, it matters a great deal.
Soon, Dax announced from the comm, "We are approaching Ferenginar." Worf interrupted.
Captain, I am picking up readings of 2 marauders already in orbit.
Quark walked to the center of the bridge.
They always patrol around Ferenginar, just in case somebody the Alliance has done business with isn't satisfied after a deal's been closed. So, how do we get to the Nagus?
Quark pointed at the marauder on the main viewer.
First, there'll be some legal requirements they'll want you to stipulate to. It could take some time. Mr. Worf, open hailing frequencies. Let's do what we have to do. This is Captain Benjamin Sisko of the Federation starship Defiant. We have aboard a Ferengi citizen who requests an immediate audience with the Grand Nagus.
At once, the main viewer showed a lone Ferengi.
I am Damon Letek of the Marauder Precon. What is the name of the Ferengi citizen you're carrying aboard your vessel?
My name is Quark.
Sisko nodded to the Daemon.
Will it be possible for Quark to meet with the Nagus?
Captain Sisko, will your vessel remain in orbit while Quark is on the surface of Ferenginar?
Yes.
Do you then agree to release the Ferengi Alliance from all claims of liability to your vessel and its crew arising from your stay within Ferengi space?
Sisko sighed. But Quark whispered, "Standard language, Captain." Sisko nodded to Letek.
Yes.
Quark, you have a house on Ferenginar?
Yes. My mother lives there.
And all of your required insurance policies and riders are current?
Yes.
And all of your premiums have been paid?
Yes, through the end of the year, as required.
Then, Captain Sisko, if you'll lower your deflectors, we will transport Quark to Grand Nagus X estate.
Sisko was surprised at the ease with which they had reached this juncture. Sisko looked over once more at Quark.
Good luck, Quark. And thank you.
After Quark was gone, Letek looked at Sisko.
We'll inform you when the Nagus is done with Quark.
And so, unable to do anything else, Sisko and his crew settled in to wait. When Quark materialized, there were 2 men in the transporter room. One approached Quark.
Welcome to the home of Grand Nagus X, Quark. His house is his house.
Quark responded in the traditional way.
As are its contents.
My name is Corlin. I am one of the Grand Nagus's personal assistants. The Grand Nagus has left orders to bring you to the Chamber of the Sun. It's one of his favorite rooms.
Corlin led Quark into an extremely tall, enormously long hall. As they traveled down the hall, Quark peered at the tapestries. They depicted renowned moments in Ferengi history, the opening of the sacred marketplace, the founding of the first bank of Ferenginar. Quark found the display inspiring. Approximately 2/3 of the way down the corridor, Corlin proceeded to a set of doors on the right side of the hall. As the door swung open, Corlin announced,
Grand Nagus X will be with you shortly.
Quark moved forward into the chamber, which was as tall as the hall was, and it was at least big enough to comfortably contain the Defiant within it. The brilliant rays of the sun shone in great angled beams into the chamber. Quark strode across the length of the chamber to the great window. He had so rarely seen such lovely weather on his home world. He brought his face right up to the transparent surface. From behind him came Zek's voice.
It's a holographic projection, but on nice days outside, this wall actually can be made transparent.
Quark was disappointed. The weather is bad?
It's producing out there right now.
There were 178 different words for rain in the Ferengi language. Producing referred to long, slim drops falling constantly at a slight angle. Almost as an afterthought, Zek slid his hands from the knob of his cane that had been fashioned in his own image from gold-pressed latinum. Quark dropped to one knee and kissed the top of the cane.
This way, Quark.
The Nagus shuffled his ancient body along one side of the room until he reached a large, ornamented chair where he sat down. He motioned for Quark to sit across from him.
So, Quark, why have you come to see me? Are you going to offer me a great deal on Vol Belly futures?
No. I wanted to talk to you about a decision you made.
I see. You think that I made a bad decision? Perhaps a mistake?
No, Nagus, no. I...
Don't you know that I make mistakes all the time? I acquired all this because I recognize my mistakes and capitalize on them. So tell me, Quark, what mistake did I make?
Well, I think you should sell the Orb of the Prophets to the Bajorans.
But I can sell the orb to somebody else and still make a sizable profit. Maybe not as much, but still a large profit.
Yes, but it's at the cost of trade with the Gamma Quadrant.
For which reason, Quark, I have declared war on Bajor. There is no question that we will defeat them.
But at what cost, Nagus? Even winning a war, ships and lives will be lost. And whoever owns the wormhole has to defend the wormhole. And there's the threat posed from the Gamma Quadrant by the Dominion. Zek nodded.
An incursion by the Dominion would be costly. Quark, you have fine business instincts. And since that is the case, I have to ask myself, what's in it for you?
I'm a fugitive from the Bajorans right now, and I've lost my bar. For talking to you about these matters, Captain Sisko has promised me political asylum if I want it. If you change your mind and sell the orb to the Bajorans, he promised me amnesty and the possibility of getting my bar back.
So, it is Captain Sisko who is driving this talk.
Yes, although the business reasoning is mine. There's also the rule of acquisition that every once in a while declare peace.
All right, Quark. I'll provide you with a response shortly.
Suddenly, Corlin appeared.
This way, Quark. I'll escort you back to the transporter room.
Quark followed Corlin out of the Chamber of the Sun and back to the transporter room. Within minutes, he found himself back aboard the Defiant, with no more idea of what his future held than when he had left the ship. On the Defiant's view screen, Grand Nagus Zek was addressing Sisko.
This is my final order, Captain. If it is not immediately accepted, then the war with Bajor will proceed.
I understand, Nagus. I'll get you that agreement right away. Mr. Worf, open a channel to First Minister Shakar on Bajor.
Captain, I cannot raise Bajor. It appears that someone is jamming transmissions either near or within the system.
Of course, Sisko thought. There was a war about to be fought, or already being fought, and both sides would be attempting to block the other's communications. Dax, set a course for Bajor. Maximum possible speed. Sisko reached up and touched the door chime to Quark and Rom's quarters. Rom stood just inside.
Quark's asleep.
You seem tired too, Rom.
I am, but I've been having a little trouble sleeping after what happened down on Bajor.
Quark only told me that you were interned at Galatap, and that you were treated very badly. He didn't provide many details. Do you want to talk about it? Come on, we'll go to my quarters where we can talk privately. Rom followed Cisco to his cabin. There, quietly and visibly anguished, Rom told Cisco about Galatep and Sergeant White and Colonel Mitra and the very worst days of his life. As the Defiant reached the field of battle, Cisco left Worf in charge of the ship and took the shuttle Da Vinci to the planet. Cisco was thrown into the port bulkhead. A powerful phaser blast had hit the Da Vinci. It was unclear from the readings who had fired on the Da Vinci, but Cisco hoped that it had been the Ferengi. More than likely, though, it had been the Bajorans, shooting from the surface of the small ship attempting to penetrate their defenses. Cisco tried to open communications with Shakar or anybody else on Bajor, and was again unsuccessful. As the next blast narrowly missed the shuttle, Cisco knew what was going to happen. The Da Vinci was going to be shot down. Still, he did not want the debris of the shuttle's wreckage to rain down on the Bajoran capital and its inhabitants. He entered the new course along with automatic landing instructions, then staggered through the shuddering cabin to the emergency transporter. Computer, energize transporter. Cisco materialized on the floor in Shakar's office. He was alone. He made his way to the First Minister's comm panel and activated it. First Minister Shakar, this is Captain Cisco. I must speak with you immediately. I'm in your office on Bajor. Cisco materialized on the platform in an operations center. A woman, dressed in the uniform of the Bajoran militia, stepped up to the platform and greeted him. Captain Cisco, the First Minister is waiting for you. Cisco found the First Minister studying a console with two other militia officers. Shakar, I have an offer from Grand Naga Zek to end the fighting. Zek is willing to do away with the auction completely, if you'll rescind your edict and meet his price for the orb, which is Bajor's last bid plus the 35 new transports you acquired from the Iridians. Shakar regarded Cisco for what seemed like a very long time. Bajor accepts the terms. Two things bothered Quark. One was Court. The more Quark considered Rom's conviction that Court had somehow set them up, the more he became inclined to believe it. Quark glanced down at the status monitor on the screen and saw that his latest series of queries were still pending. It had been like that since his return a week ago to Deep Space Nine, his tedious searches for information about Court consuming great chunks of time. Unfortunately, his quest for information about Court had so far proved fruitless. Bah! Quark got up and walked across his quarters to the replicator. Archerian slug wine. He took the glass and sipped. Not as good as the real thing from Archer 4, of course. Not as thick or as pulpous. But considering the past few months, it would do. Quark strode over to the comm panel and eyed the brief message displayed there. Search subject not found. Computer, when the search is complete, don't notify me audibly.
Oral notification canceled.
Quark headed for his bedroom. He would check the results in the morning. Colonel Mitra slipped silently into the room and waited a moment for his eyes to adjust to the dimness. His eyes were still cold. Perhaps they had survived the raw days and nights of Galatep winter because of their coldness. His skin was more than ashen, it was translucent. Gouges in his sunken cheeks marked the places where flesh had died and fallen away. In 3 strides, Mitra was at the bedroom door. He walked to the bed and looked down at his prey. He adjusted his grip on his knife, using what remained of his hands. The cold had killed the tips of his fingers, dead tissue falling away to expose the bone beneath. He bent down and eased the blade below the wide, circular expanse of Quark's left ear. Prisoner 8. Quark's eyes began to flutter open. Colonel, address me as Gull. Gull Mitra. Yes, Commander of Galatep, the Butcher of Galatep. He jerked his arm backward, dragging the edge of the knife up and through the cartilage of Quark's ear. Quark bolted up in bed, his hands rushing to the gaping hole on the side of his head. Instead, what he felt was the mass of his ear, whole and uninjured. Only a dream. Mitra is dead. It was only a dream. Knowing that sleep had deserted him for the night, he went back to the main room and his search for sense in an irrational universe. Later, as Quark worked at the comm panel, there it was. The results of his latest search had come back positive. It turned out to be a 3-year-old announcement of new appointees in several areas of the Ferengi government. Quark's duty was as a personal assistant to the Grand Nagus. And that brought Quark 4 square to the other thing that had been troubling him. Zek himself. Maybe the Nagus had blundered in his handling of the auction of the orb. Zek pays court to get arrested and remain interned on Bajor until the specific time when Court calls his shuttle and helps the prisoners escape. He then steers them almost directly to the Defiant, where he fakes an accident both to cover his actions and to gain Sisko's attention. Could the Nagus have known that Sisko would bring Quark to Ferengi? Quark looked back at the comm panel. He would have to seek additional clues, because there were 2 things Quark was sure of. When all of this had started, the Nagus had failed to sell the orb to the Bajorans. And when it had ended, he had sold the orb to the Bajorans. That indicated to Quark that Grand Nagus Zek was losing his touch. Disgusted and sad, Quark switched off the comm panel. I don't really want to know what happened. In his office on Deep Space Nine, Sisko picked up a pad from his desk and read through the First Minister's letter a second time. Shakar had elected to do all the right things, and he had done those things quickly. Although the edict barring Ferengi from Bajoran space had been rescinded immediately upon the delivery of the 9th orb to Bajor, Shakar also stated that the Bajorans were trying to determine how Colonel Mitra had managed to reopen and resupply Galatep. Finally, the letter confirmed a rumor Sisko had considered too good to be true. The death toll during the war had been 0. Come in. Quark entered the office and approached Sisko's desk. You asked to see me, Captain? Yes, I did, Quark. Thank you for what you did. The fact that you were able to change Zek's mind, well, you probably saved tens of thousands of lives. You're welcome, I guess. Quark turned and headed for the doors. Quark, is everything all right? Quark hesitated for a moment. I think the Nagus may be losing his business skills. I think that's an understatement, Quark. The Nagus miscalculated. By ejecting the Bajorans from the auction, it forced the Bajorans to cut the Ferengi off from the wormhole, which resulted in the Ferengi blockade, and in the eventual arming of Bajor by the Iridians. Hold it, Captain. I thought before you told me that the Bajorans got those new starships from the Karama. I think you asked about the origin of those ships. We believe that they were first owned by the Karama. Anyway, the starships were actually sold to the Bajorans by the Iridians, and now they belong to the Ferengi. Quark appeared stunned, and then ill. Captain, I was the one who negotiated the sale of those starships to the Iridians. You arranged the transaction between the Karama and the Iridians? No. I sold those starships to the Iridians from the Ferengi. Quark paused, putting it all together. It all makes sense now. It was all for greater profits. Zex. Together, Sisko and Quark traced their way through the maze of the Nagus' great scheme. Zek had intentionally expelled the Bajorans from the auction, expecting that they would react by closing the wormhole to the Ferengi. That action had given the Nagus sufficient cause to blockade Bajor. Sisko shook his head. It's so easy to see now that the blockade was a ruse. I couldn't figure out why the Nagus would execute a blockade and then allow food and medicine through. It was because the Nagus had no real interest in hurting the Bajoran people. Sisko then explained to Quark how Shakaar had purchased the 35 starships from the Iridians. The Nagus had doubtless made sure that when he allowed Quark to sell the ships to the Iridians, that they knew the Bajorans would shortly be looking to arm themselves. And he would have played upon the Iridians' thirst for saleable information by suggesting this means of gaining access to DS9's Gamma Quadrant data. Sisko then told Quark about the staged encounter between the Bajoran ships and the Marauder, and how Zek had used that as the cause to declare war. What I don't understand, Quark, is why did the Nagus do all of this? 35 brand new starships, Captain. Well, 35 slightly used starships. The Nagus sold those same ships to the Iridians for a huge profit. And now, he's going to sell those same 35 starships to the Karama. Sisko felt his jaw drop. That's who they were built for in the first place. Yep. Zek's a genius. So, all of this, Quark, everything, was simply so the Nagus could make greater profits. Quark nodded. And the Iridians now have an information pipeline into Deep Space Nine in the Gamma Quadrant. With his ties to the Iridians, I'm sure the Nagus will also be able to take advantage of that arrangement. The Nagus ended up with everything he wanted. The 34th rule of acquisition really applies here. War is good for business. Sisko reached across the desk and handed Quark a pad. Maybe not everything he wanted. This is the contract between the Iridians and the Bajorans, permitting the Iridians access to the data from our communications relay in the Gamma Quadrant. I want to find some way of allowing the Bajorans to fulfill the letter of this contract without our having to compromise our data. I thought you might be able to help. Quark read the document. Simplicity itself, Captain. This contract states that the Bajorans must allow the Iridians to monitor all transmissions from the Gamma Quadrant relay to the station. But it does not demand that the Iridians understand those transmissions. Sisko understood immediately. Encryption. Exactly, Captain. You're quite a businessman, Quark. Quark tipped his head in acknowledgement and left. In Quark's bar, the Bolian placed his thumb on Quark's banking device, completing the transaction. I'm sure you'll be very satisfied with this Betazoid gift box.
It better work.
Of course it'll work. Quark walked back down to the other end of the bar. Morn never seemed to tire of asking him questions about his experiences. So, where was I? I was telling you about the Nagus' palace. As Quark recounted his arrival at Zek's estate, he privately marveled at the shrewdness and cunning of the Nagus. Zek was brilliant. Quark had not told Sisko about Quart, about his being employed by the Nagus, and about how he had made sure that Quark had been delivered into Sisko's hands at just the right time. Zek is a master. As Quark finished telling his story, he noticed Major Kira enter the bar. Major, what can I do for you? You can listen, Quark. I'm all ears. To Quark's astonishment, Kira smiled. I just wanted to tell you that I'm sorry. I heard about what happened to you on Bajor. And I also heard about you talking with the Nagus to get him to sell us the orb. I wanted to thank you for what you did. I still don't understand you, or the Ferengi way of life, but I guess that's not really a reason to hate you. No, Major. And if it's any consolation, I don't understand you either. Kira seemed uncomfortable. She turned on her heel and strode out of the bar. Later that night, when he was closing the bar, Quark smiled again when he thought back to the Major's visit and to her apology. Perhaps it was a starting point for better understanding between the two of them. Quark finished locking up, and after he had counted and secured the day's receipts, he went to his old familiar place behind the bar and switched on the comm panel. There was a deal out there waiting for him. He just had to find it. The Nagus had inspired him. One day, Quark knew, he would own his own moon. It took patience and experience, but if you looked in the right places, with the right perspective, it was just possible that the universe actually could make sense.
Star Trek Deep Space Nine, The 34th Rule, was written by Armin Shimerman and David George, and read by Armin Shimerman. It was adapted for audio by George Truitt. The tape editors were Stephen Strassman and Jocelyn Gonzalez, with post-production and sound design by Gary Fink. Original music was composed by Sam McCallie, Carl Schurtz, Eve Buglarian, and Richard Emmett. The production assistant was William Carlino. The associate producer was Florence Barreau Adams. The director was Linda Woolman. The 34th Rule was produced by Elisa Shokoff. This has been a production of Simon & Schuster Audio.